Good afternoon from Moscow, Russia. We're back for the second day of the Girls 20 Summit. My name is Farah Mohamed, and I'm the President and CEO of the Girls 20 Summit. Before I launch into my comments about the theme of our summit, for those in the room, please direct your attention to the screen as we show you a glimpse of our incredible delegates in action over the past few days. Ladies, I hope you enjoy this.
My name is Ntaiya. I'm the African Union's delegate. My advice to the G20 leaders is to develop a coalition to work along with them during the decision-making process.
I'm Lucy. I'm from Argentina. My piece of advice to the G20 leaders is to take into deep consideration the ideas and thoughts of all young people around the world who finally will be the leaders of tomorrow.
Hi, my name is Linda and I'm the delegate from Australia. One piece of advice I have for the G20 leaders is that they need to find more innovative, more effective, more out of the orthodox solutions to global economic problems. And one of the best solutions to that is educating and empowering girls and women.
My name is Lara. I'm from Brazil. My advice to the G20 is to empower women, because if they empower women, they can change the world.
My name is Morgan. I'm from Canada. If I have one piece of advice for G20 leaders, it's, are you teaching programming in your schools, and are you teaching it to girls?
I am Helen and I am the delegate of China. My advice for the G20 is to build more local partnerships and also more multi-stakeholder partnerships between the government, the media, and also the civil society.
Hi, my name is Mariana Jacinto. I'm from the European Union. One piece of advice that I have for G20 leaders is to open their eyes to the youth of everywhere in the world and to see what they are doing and invest on them.
My name is Violette Perrot. I am the delegate for France. One piece of advice I would have for the G20 leaders would be to include women in their decision making.
My name is Luca and I'm representing Germany. My piece of advice to the G20 leaders is to only make promises they can actually keep.
My name is Aishani and I'm a delegate from India. One piece of advice I have for the G20 leaders is to set up more financial institutions to provide easy funding and training for girls and women to become entrepreneurs and begin their own startups.
My name is Putri Agustina. I'm from Indonesia. My message to the G20 leader is please help the NGO to support women, because women is very important for us. Educate women is educate generation.
Ciao, my name is Isabella. I'm the delegate from Italy. An advice I have for G20 leaders is to invest in childhood care, early childhood care, in order to support women and families and get more women to work.
My advice for the G20 leader of Japan is to involve more girls in science and technology. I think that it's such a great way to get women involved in the workforce, especially with regards to entrepreneurship and getting more girls involved in technology. And in other countries, it seems from talking to the other girls that it's a much more respected field for women, and I hope that someday it'll be as well for Japan.
My name is Sofia Isadora Padilla Muñoz, and I am the Girls 20 Summit delegate from Mexico. My advice to the G20 leaders is to support women and girls to start her own business.
My name is Alina and I'm from Russia. My piece of advice for G20 leaders will be to listen to young girls' voice. There are many of us around the globe, and just ask our opinion.
My name is Maro Abdul Qadir. I'm representing Saudi Arabia. My only piece of advice for the G20 leaders is to listen to youth.
My name is Nyaradzayi Octavium Tweni. I'm representing South Africa. One piece of advice that I have for the G20 leaders is to help and encourage women to participate in economical and political issues.
Hi, my name is Yumin and I'm from Republic of Korea. And my advice to G20 leaders is to provide incentives for those companies to hire a lot of women so that they can promote women leaders to grow more.
I am Dinara Jorobekova, and in Girls 20 Summit I'm representing Turkey. My advice to G20 leaders is just to make women education a priority.
Hey, I'm Ellie Mawson and I'm from the United Kingdom. I think that the G20 leaders should make sure that everyone knows what the G20 Summit is about so that the whole world can start making the steps to improve.
My name is Jenny. I'm representing the United States of America. My advice to the G20 leaders is to mandate women participate in leadership positions in the G20 Summit.
Well done. Isn't it great to see yourselves in action? It is, isn't it? Thank you to workbay.net who worked all night to put that together for you guys. It goes without saying, if you looked at my face while I was up here, I feel so proud of the work that you've done and anxious for the work that you're going to be doing. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, either in the room or via live stream, we've been here for about 4 days. 2 of those days were workshops with a variety of partners. We learned about technology, communications, a whole host of things. And yesterday, we spent the day on a theme that we call Opportunity Gained, where we really looked at where in different industries girls and women can start to make traction if certain changes are made. We have kept a very fast pace, and we've been able to do this because, first of all, we're women, but second of all, because we've put together a great group of partners, and I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge those partners at this time. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge Caterpillar, Girl Up, and the United Nations Foundation, Google. We're here at Google Moscow and have been for our last couple of days. Norton Rose Fulbright, the Nike Foundation, NoVo Foundation, the Gerald Schwartz and Heather Reisman Foundation, Kinross, Workbay.net, Académie Diplomatique Internationale, the one time I have to use my French, right? Macro Blue and Mikhailov and partners. Because of you guys, we're able to provide such an incredible experience. So please join me, delegates, in giving them a round of applause. So yesterday we put the G20 agenda to test. We talked about jobs, we talked about growth, we talked about investment, and we did all that using the Google Hangout product. And today we're doing the same, and in fact we're not going to have any in-person guests. We're actually going to go completely digital today and make sure that we can move ourselves around the world, hearing from a variety of people on a very difficult topic. As I said, yesterday was about opportunity gained, and today is about opportunity lost. And when we pick the kind of language we do when we say that, it really is about what are you going to miss out on if you don't fix this issue. And this year, and in fact, this is, somebody pointed out to me, this is not the first time we're talking about child marriage. We've talked about this issue before because we truly believe that if the statistics are, as you saw in the film, 14.2 million girls get married every year in a forced early child marriage situation. If you do the math, not only that is that a human rights issue, not only is that a missed opportunity for those girls, it has a serious economic consequence. I want to tell you a little bit about why we started this journey to talk about the eradication of child marriage. I had an opportunity to meet with a wonderful woman called Mabel Van Orange. She used to be I see Melissa smiling, she used to be the CEO of the Elders. And Mabel had the opportunity working with the Elders. The Elders are a group of senior statesmen. We have Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Gracia Machel, Mary Robinson, and a whole bunch of others who got together and decided that it was up to them to pick issues that the world should know about and act on. So Mabel, and if you ever meet Mabel, you'll know that she has incredible powers. But this group of elders actually thought that they should take this issue up. And after this meeting that I had with Mabel, we were invited, Girls 20 was invited to go to Ethiopia and meet with Desmond Tutu and Mary Robinson and others, Gracia Machel, with about 50 different organizations. And in Ethiopia, where there are tremendous gains being made to eradicate child marriage, we put together this coalition, and the coalition became known as Girls Not Brides. What I'm going to do is ask you to watch a movie. I could stand up here and give you statistic after statistic. But I think these people can say it much better than I can. So if we could roll the video, that would be great. Thank you.
People don't seem to talk much about child brides. Perhaps it is seen as a family issue and not a public one, or a cultural issue and not one of human rights. But I cannot stay silent.
This is a grave human rights issue, but it's also a development issue. How can you improve girls' education when they're taken out of school to be married? How can you reduce maternal or child mortality when girls are giving birth at 12 or 13? How can you reduce poverty when child marriage perpetuates poverty?
People may say it is tradition, it cannot change, but I know it is not true. Traditions can change because they are made by people.
Great change can happen in a single generation. I know this to be true. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Change happens through protecting girls' rights in law and practice, empowering them to take control of their own bodies and destinies, and to even become leaders and change makers themselves.
Once you have women liberated, it's amazing how many other problems get resolved. Poverty, education, health. Women are the key in any community.
Change happens through raising community awareness of the dangers of child marriage and the benefits of stopping this practice. This is happening on a small scale, but change is far too slow.
Just imagine what would happen if we invest more in girls, enabling them to make choices, to earn a living with dignity, to break the cycle of illiteracy, the cycle of ill health, the cycle of poverty that traps them and their communities.
Imagine if we connect all those around the world who are working bravely to end child marriage. Imagine the scale of change possible.
We can do more than imagine. We can end child marriage now. Let girls be girls and not brides.
In a few moments, we're going to be joined by Lakshmi, who works at Girls Not Brides. But before we do that, I don't know how you feel, but the first time I saw that film, I was mesmerized, especially because of the issue, but also because if you look at the leaders who are now galvanizing communities around this issue, it is quite amazing that it has taken this long. But that you have this sort of critical mass of people now wanting to get behind this issue and really put a stop to it. So while we take the time to transition to our next two panelists, I want to hear from the delegates. First, show of hands, how many people before the summit, before you actually got involved with the Girls 20 Summit, how many of you are aware of the prevalence of child marriage? So quite a bit of you. And my second question would be, how many of you think that it exists in your own countries? And do you think your governments pay? So for the people on the I'm just going to keep asking questions, and our viewers are going to go, what's going on? The majority of the delegates raised their hand for the first question, about 5 or 6 for the second question. And I guess for the 5 or 6, how many of you feel that your government feels a responsibility to do something about the issue of eradicating early forced marriages. So no one's raised their hand. And that's why we put this issue on the agenda. Many people see this as a cultural issue, as the film pointed out. Some people will see it as a social issue, and some people will see it as an issue they just don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. But the reality is, and I've said this and I sound like a bit of a broken record, if you do take that many girls out of the system, they're not going to go to school, they're going to have poor health outcomes, that's going to affect society. That is what I call the domino effect that has a severe implication on strong communities, strong countries, and giving a chance for a woman to actually be a contributing member of society in a way that she wishes to do. And that comes down to whether or not that young woman has the ability to make a choice that all of us want to make. When are we going to get married? How old are we going to be when we get married? And are we going to have children? Part of the challenge, I think, in facing this issue is it may not seem that it's prevalent in some countries, but in fact it is. And I don't make a lot of friends when I say this, but the world is changing. People come in and out of countries, and when people come in and out of countries, they come in and out of countries with their own customs and their own beliefs. And so this is an issue that is not just particular in one part of the world. It may be more prevalent there, but certainly it does exist in other places in the world. So I'm just going to do a little check and see if we're ready for our panelists. I'm going to have to do my interpretive dance. Now we're ready. See, I always get saved just like that because no one wants to see it. I am very proud that we have with us, joining us today, Lakshmi Sundaram of Girls Not Brides, who's in London, and Dr. Kakenya Ntaiya, who founded Kakenya's Dream in Kenya. So welcome to both of you. Hello? Maybe you're on mute. Kakenya's on mute, I think. Yeah. Kakenya, I think you're on mute. Hit that mute button. I'm going to have to do my interpretive dance. This is going to be terrible for everyone. And I don't see Lakshmi. That's not Lakshmi. Corley's getting up now. Well, I can't answer all the questions, but why don't we just ask you guys to say a few words about how you felt about the film and getting leaders involved while we sort out some of our technical difficulties. So, ladies, you guys are never short of opinions. Who's got the mic and who can share how they feel about this? Go ahead. Please stand up, though.
Okay.
And just for our viewers who are maybe joining us for the first time today, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Violette, and I represent France. One thing that I thought was really interesting is when one of the member of the elders said that tradition can change because they're made by people, and it's true that it's sometimes very, very often in countries traditions is used as an excuse to perpetrate child marriage because it's something that is that way and that has been that way forever, so we're not going to start changing it now. And that's why I think it's really, really hard for people who are there, for girls who are there, to stand up, because you literally have to stand up against an entire village, an entire community, and an entire history too. So I thought that was interesting to point out that you're not it's not inevitable because traditions are made by people, so people can change traditions too.
Yes.
I'm Linda. I'm representing Australia at the summit. So what I found interesting, pretty much following on from Violette's point, is that child marriage, not only is it not just is it a tradition that doesn't need to be accepted because it's created, the traditions are created by people, but we also don't need to introduce an element of cultural relativism. We don't need to say these traditions are part of particular cultures and have always been so and are immutable and are just key to this particular tradition. No, we don't have to accept that, and we don't have to say that we're going to accept these because these are part of their culture. Because if these traditions are wrong and if they hurt girls and women, then they should be eradicated.
Absolutely. We're going to actually come back to questions because I think we've sorted out our technical difficulties. So if we could have Lakshmi brought on the screen and Dr. Kakenya, and we will have them speak to us. You know, this is the interesting things about digital conferences, right? You got to go with the flow. Yeah, and now I'm getting into my interpretive dance. Can we take more? We'll take one more question.
Hi, I'm
Or
Jenny.
comment.
Hi, I'm Jenny from the United States, and I know this is a conference about girls and women, but my thoughts and questions are about the young boys and men who are also affected in child marriage, because as the term or the terminology suggests, it's not just about girls being forced into marriage, but and little boys, but entire communities that are that face these problems. And I think that when girls and boys are forced into these situations, it's a symptom of a greater problem. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the leaders and experts on this issue have to say about that, because as we know, with many social issues, there are many problems that cause it, and I would just like to hear also an advocate for boys as well.
Yeah. You know, that's a great comment. In fact, one of my advisory board members said to me just before I left, we really have to start getting ourselves more, we already do, but we have to get more men and boys engaged in this discussion. And you're right, it does affect both. It does affect girls more than boys, but you can't ignore that fact. So we are just about to get them on the line. On that issue, I'm gonna throw it out to the delegates. What is the most effective way, and we have time for one person, what's the most effective way of getting boys and men engaged in this, in looking at eradication of child marriage? What do you guys think is the most effective way? Yes.
I think a lot has been said about educating youth, which is of course very important, but it's important to recognize as well that these youth are being learn whatever traditions that they pursue because of the elders that they look up to. So two things that that came to mind was it was so inspirational to see this organization with really respected people addressing this issue, and the second is the importance that this brings up of educating the elders within communities as well, local communities, on these issues, because I feel that really creates, like you said, a domino effect for the younger people in the community.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree on that. So how are we doing on our technology? Are we ready to go? We're not ready to go. Well, what I think I might do then is I'm going to just go ahead and tell you about Lakshmi and Dr. Kakenya, and then they can join us, and you will already know about them. So I met Lakshmi in New York at the Clinton Global Initiative, and she had just come on to lead the basically spin-off from the elders. So the elders identified this as an issue, and then Lakshmi was made the global director of Girls Not Brides, and has taken that, and really her role is to put together partners who will work on this together. So Lakshmi and I don't usually do formal bios, but hers is quite impressive. Lakshmi helps partnership members work together to bring the issue of child marriage to global attention and to be more effective in addressing the problem. Lakshmi plays a pivotal role in linking partners, members, facilitating their joint efforts in advocacy, which is incredibly important, which is part of what we're doing, and communications, and supporting members to learn from each other about effective approaches to ending child marriage. And one of the things I did pick out of her long CV was that she is a Global Leadership Fellow of the World Economic Forum. So I see that we have them both on the screen. Lakshmi, I've just finished introducing you. Hello.
Thank you. I heard parts of it, and you were extremely kind.
Not at all. And Dr. Kakenya and Ntaiya, I'm going to introduce you now, and then we're gonna speed away to you guys and have you take over the floor. So, Dr. Kakenya, life for Kakenya was supposed to follow a traditional path. Engaged at age 5, she was to be circumscribed by the time she was a teenager, an event that would mark the end of her education and the beginning of her preparations for marriage. But Kakenya had a different plan. First, she negotiated with her father. She would be circumcised only if she could finish high school. He agreed. Then she negotiated with the village elders to do what no girl had ever done, to leave her Maasai village in South Kenya to go to college in the United States. She promised that she would use her education to benefit her community when she was done. The entire village collected money to pay for her journey. The girl who grew up without electricity ended up writing papers on international relations and political science on computers in the university library. She went on to the University of Pittsburgh, where she received her doctorate in education. We are so pleased to have both of you join us today. I believe, Kakenya, you are joining us from Kenya, is that right?
Yes.
You are. And Lakshmi, you're joining us from London, I believe.
I'm actually in Geneva at the moment.
Oh, you're in Geneva.
I'm normally based in London.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Just to give you a little bit of background, we are spending the entire day on this issue, and in terms of your contribution here, we really wanted you guys to outline what the problem is, what the challenge is, what the opportunities are. So I've got a couple of questions, and then I know our delegates are going to want to do the same. So Lakshmi, let me start with you. Tell us why the elders chose this issue and how it became, how it sort of gave it, well, I'm going to use the term, gave birth to Girls Not Brides. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of history on that and why it's important to have had that start.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The elders were really interested in taking on an issue that brought to the attention of the world this idea that sometimes religion and tradition can be misused. And they've always been very, very interested in using their voice to push for the equality between men and women and boys and girls. And when they first started, so they were exploring, different issues that are out there. When they first heard about child marriage, well, first of all, they were just completely shocked to hear about the scale. It's a practice that affects 14 million girls every single year. And it's also a practice that is affecting girls all over the world, not just in some of the pockets that we think of as being high prevalence. So that was something that they found incredibly shocking. They just had no idea about the scale. And then they also started wondering, why was it that they'd never heard about this issue? And why was it that they were unaware of the scale? And realized that actually it's something that people, particularly at kind of national, regional, international level, people don't want to talk about child marriage because it's a bit uncomfortable. This is something that, Farah, you said a little earlier, but also because it sort of is dealing with the family and things that happen, within people's houses. And it's just very uncomfortable. People don't want to be seen as being attacking other people's cultures or other people's traditions. And so they prefer just not to address the issue at all. And I think for the elders, this was something incredibly shocking. They wanted to make sure that they have the moral authority to actually be able to bring light to this issue. And no one can accuse someone like Graça Machel to be a cultural imperialist, right? I mean, she's not she's talking about issues that affect her own communities and the people that she meets on a regular basis. So they felt that there was a real opportunity for them to actually talk about the issue and start really bringing attention to child marriage around the world. They also realized that there were a number of organizations that were doing some really great work, a small number, but often organizations that are working at the community level, but often these organizations were working very much in isolation. They didn't realize that there were other groups that were doing similar work. And so one of the things the elders felt that they could do as well was to set up a global partnership to really try and bring together the different organizations that are working on child marriage, allow them an opportunity to share experiences, share learnings, but also to help build up a sense of solidarity. Because sometimes when you're working with communities, when you're sometimes in opposition to community elders, it can be really difficult work. And there are some incredibly brave people. I mean, we have, I'm absolutely delighted to be sitting on this panel with Kakenya, because she's one of these incredibly brave people who's addressing this issue at a community level. And I think through the partnership, there's an opportunity to, first of all, for people like Kakenya to be able to share their experiences, but also for the global partnership to be able to showcase some of this work that's happening in communities and really, again, push the idea that this is an important issue. It's an issue that can actually be addressed. We can, if we have concerted effort, bring an end to child marriage within a generation, and we just need to work together to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. Thank you for Kakenya. When I first read your bio, I was absolutely amazed that you single-handedly, I mean, obviously working with people who believe in you, but you single-handedly changed the course of your life. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about what that was like and maybe just share your story. I mean, I read a little bit of your story, but it's always best when it comes from the person who lived it. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's really a privilege to be sitting here and sharing with you about what happens in most communities in rural Kenya or in other parts of the world. I think I was just, when I was growing up and knowing that I had a husband that was waiting to me to be married to him when I was 12 years old, it was a norm. And it was a good thing because my mom was very hardworking, so everybody wanted to marry a daughter from that family or my family. So it was seen as something that, you know, every mother and father would want that. But because of how hard my mother was working, you know, raising 8 of us, I am the first of 8, and that meant that I had to help her raise my other siblings. And that was quite difficult because I was just helping her. And I used to ask myself, what about when I'm 12 and I have my own children? And it was quite a difficult thing. So my mother always insisted that we go to school because she dropped out of school. And she said if she had continued with school, she would have been living a different life. But she never wanted us to live that life that she was living. My father was very abusive. He beat her, and everything we owned was my father's by default. He would go drink in the bars with his friends. My mother would never ask him, and if she did ask, he was beaten and harassed. And so because of that life that I was seeing, I needed to come up with a better life. I went to school and saw teachers, and I wanted to become like one of them, because I thought teachers are just writing on the board and it's quite an easy job than working in the farm, and you know, and at the end of the day I'll have my own money and I can do whatever I wanted to do. But it's a dream that one might see it was an easy one, that you just go to high school and you go to a teacher's college and you get it. But here I had a husband waiting for me, and so I had to figure a way out of being married at 12, and I was able to negotiate my way out, testing ground with my father and my elders, and now, you know, many years later, giving back to the community and helping girls to have dreams that I wanted to have when I was young and to achieve them.
Well, it's when Lakshmi, we talked about who would be a great panelist to actually speak with experience. She said, it has to be Kakenya because she really kept her commitment. And I think one of the things, and I'm going to go to you, Kakenya, again, but Lakshmi, I'm going to put you on the spot here because through Girls Not Brides, you come across a lot of organizations who are working to not just prevent this, but for girls who are in fact married and are in these positions, trying to get them out of the situation that they're in. So, you know, in the one hand, we had Kakenya who sort of diverted it and has come back and kept her promise, and we'll come back and have her explain that. But tell me how you really try to work with the girls who are already in the situation.
So I think that's a great question. I think it's really important to keep in mind that this is, the global partnership to bring an end to child marriage is not just focused on on preventing child marriage, but really also on supporting married girls. So I was saying earlier, there are 14 million girls who are married every year. That's a huge number, and they often fall off the map. They're often taken out of school. They often don't have access to economic empowerment opportunities. They are often under a huge amount of social pressure to become pregnant very quickly and prove their fertility and have children very quickly. But the sorts of programs that are often in place that reach out to young people, they're not really tailored to young people who happen to be married. And then programs that tend to focus on young mothers or expecting mothers, again, they're tailored for women who are older. So quite a few of our members actually do focus very specifically on the needs of married girls, to help them. In some cases, it may be to help them get out of a marriage. But in some cases, the girls, they obviously had a very unfortunate circumstance and were married off young, but it's sort of trying to work with them on finding ways, it may be to give them opportunities to go to school, and that might be something as seemingly simple as trying to identify the appropriate childcare so that the girl has an opportunity to go back to school and potentially start earning a living outside the home if it's something that she wants to do. And really trying to think about what is it that some of these married girls need within their specific context. And actually, there are a number of the organizations that we do work with that actually have found that a number of these married girls have become major champions. They, they've come out of a marriage, but some may still be married. But they've really started speaking out within their communities to make the case as to why it is that actually this practice may not make sense for their younger sisters or for their daughters, or for other girls within the community. A little bit, Kakenya was talking about her mother's experience with education and how for her it was really important for her daughters to go to school. Similarly, there will be other women who were married as children who are really trying to take a leadership role within their communities so that this is something that doesn't happen to their younger sisters and their daughters.
Well, what I think, you've said a lot there, and one of the things that you said is that when girls do find themselves in the situation, we do have to find ways to figure out that particular circumstance. And Kakenya, I imagine you were quite the negotiator at the age that you managed to chart your own path, and part of that was making a deal with your community. So tell us a little bit about what kind of deal did you make with your community to have them all come together and fund your education? And tell us what has come, and you call this Kakenya's dream. So please tell us about your dream.
As I was telling you earlier, that my dream when I was young was to become a teacher and to have freedom in life and, achieve things in life. And after I went to high school, I had found somebody who was in America, and I thought, the way I could actually achieve my biggest dream is to go and study abroad. And he found me a scholarship to a university in Lynchburg, Virginia. But it was not just an easy thing. Even though I had a scholarship, I had to raise money for air tickets and other things to go to the US. But what I had the challenge is that one, there was a husband on one side waiting for me, and the other side is that there has never been a woman in my village who had gone to high school, past high school and going to college, and there hasn't been a woman who had left the village to go to the city, leave alone to go to another country. And so there was a lot of people were very against it. The elders and the men were saying, why would we give an opportunity for a girl? This opportunity should be given to a boy. And I had to come up with ways for them to actually help me go to the US and raise money to help me. I knew the culture very well, and I needed their support, and so I never wanted to just run away and go. And I had to go to the chief and tell him that I am going to be one of the best girls that I could be, and I was going to represent them very well, and that I will go and get an education, and when I'll come back, because one of their worries was always that I will go and never come back to the village, and they never wanted that. So I had to promise them that I will come back, and when I come back, I will use my education to better the community. And that was quite an attractive thing. And so they all supported me. And I went to study in the US. Little did I know then that I was actually going to fulfill my promise, because then I was like, I just need to get out of this village and go away. But when I really got to the US, that's when I learned about my rights. I learned about that child marriage is, it's wrong to be married when you're under 18 years old. I learned that I had the right to go to school. I learned that, I didn't have to go through female genital cutting, which is a rite of passage to womanhood. I learned a lot of things that really kind of just made me become angry, but also very wanting to to do something about the girls in my village who were then getting married, then dreams were being cut short. They were living lives that they never wanted to live. And so I wanted to do something. And that's when we started the School for Girls. It's the Kakenya's dream is really the place where girls dream, and they know that the sky is the limit and they don't have to negotiate to go to school. They don't have to be married when they're 12 years old. They are girls who are going to be great change makers for our community and the world. And so they know that, the future is bright for them. And so we have really worked hard. We have 155 girls. All of them, their fathers are very supportive. We've worked with them. All of them are not going to go through the natural, traditional paths of rights that girls go in the village. And really, we have turned around the idea that educating a girl is educating her for another family. It is more educating a girl. She will come back to the village. She will help us. The future for educating a girl is more brighter now. And I think for my community, I became the role model that they had never seen anybody, any girl who had gone and gotten an education. But now I've become that role model. And really the idea of marrying their daughters young is really changing. And I think it is a positive thing that we've been able to do.
That's incredible. You're what we call a trailblazer. And when you're talking about, somebody invests in you and you make a commitment and you go back to your community, that's very much what we're trying to encourage our delegates to do. So we only have about 10 minutes. I don't want to ask all my questions. Our delegates always have great questions. So I'm going to open up the floor to ask Lakshmi or Kakenya a question, and please direct your answer. And please do keep your questions short. And your answers as precise as possible. So who wants to ask the first question? Yes. We're just passing the mic up here.
My name is Lara. I'm representing Brazil. In my country, there's no this issue of child marriage, but there's the teenage pregnancy, and the consequences are the same of the child marriage. No job, no quality of education, no quality of living, no quality to their children or to the family. And how can this project about child marriage can help to solve this teenage pregnancy issue?
So who would you like to answer that first?
Both.
Okay. Why don't we start with Lakshmi?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. So very quickly, in the interest of time, actually there is child marriage in Brazil as well. I don't have the numbers offhand, but I'd be more than happy to send that to you. So it is an issue as well in a country like Brazil. It's an issue that happens all over the world. But many of the factors that actually lead to teenage pregnancy are often also the same ones that lead to child marriage. Often it's a fundamental difference in how people view girls and boys and the value that is placed on a girl and a boy. And then, of course, issues such as poverty, violence, lack of other opportunities, etc. So I think, and one of the things to maybe clarify is that as a partnership, the organizations that work on bringing an end to child marriage aren't just focused on the specific issue of child marriage. It's often all the other underlying factors that are linked to child marriage. And so for us, what's really important is not just that girls don't get married early, but that they are given the opportunity to thrive. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind, that many of the ways in which the members address child marriage are also the ways in which one could address teenage pregnancy, which is really trying to, on the one hand, make sure that girls themselves have access to education, to an understanding of their own rights and opportunities, that there are role models around them, who can present a different picture of the future for them, but also that they have access to sexual reproductive health services and have an understanding of their rights in that arena as well, and that there are opportunities out there for them, if they do finish school, to actually become productive economic members of society also, so that pregnancy isn't seen as the only way that a girl can bring value to a family or a community or a partnership.
Kakenya, can we get you to weigh in on that one, please?
I think the way Lakshmi has really elaborated is what it is. So, in my school, we always, we are preventing early marriages, but at the same time, we don't want them to be pregnant when they're in high school. And so it's about providing all the services that actually help the girl to thrive. What we do in our school, we do give them all the education, from reproductive health, trainings to leadership skills, to really developing them to becoming people who can defend themselves. We actually even go to the extreme of even teaching them martial arts and taekwondo and all that, because I think we realize that girls do go through a lot of problems in life, and so we want them to be empowered, and so that's the much I can add to that.
I've just been told we've got extra time, so I'm going to actually pipe in with my question as well. I think one of the challenges as a partner who's in Canada, and very lucky to be part of this global partnership, is you always want to be careful that it's not the North and the South conversation. And Kakenya, I suspect that, and I'm turning to you because I'm African-born, Indian heritage, but I live in Canada, and I feel a certain sensitivity when people start pointing fingers, which we don't do in terms of this is a problem in this country, this is a problem in another country. How do you actually deal with that? Because you have a global partnership who wants to really weigh in on this issue, but we all need to be sensitive and careful that we're not saying you must do it our way, because our way is not necessarily the right way. We're just trying to, I think, address a very serious issue and to do it together. So, maybe talk to us a little bit about the sensitivity around where this does happen and working with organizations where it doesn't happen. And it's always goodwill and it's always meant to do the right thing. But tell me a little bit about how and how that sort of works in your mind in terms of those who are trying to help on this issue but don't necessarily really, they don't get it, but they don't necessarily experience it in their own countries.
I think I personally think we all have a place to play in the table. From my perspective of working in a very remote village in you can't even find it on Google Earth. It's very macro, and it's very limited and it's very small. But for me to be able to be effective, is I need people like Girls Not Bride elevating what we're doing on the ground, and I think we all have a place to play. We can implement, but when without that law that says early marriage is against the law, then it's very difficult for me to actually implement that. So I always focus on, we all have a place, and it's always good to understand. And I really like the way the Girls Not Bride work. They bring us together as a group in different locations, and they make us work as groups that are from different countries, but also they give us what is available in the UN and other countries. And I think that friendship and that way of working is really very helpful, because without them maybe you would not even know about our work. And so there's always that partnership, and I think it asks for to go beyond thinking, we know more and you don't know anything and we think we are the best. But that partnership, we all have something to bring on the table. And I think we'll all have room. If we could work together, it's actually more effective, because now Girls Not Bride, through my work, we're actually able to help girls in a rural village in Kenya not go through early marriages.
So Lakshmi, before I turn it back to our delegates for questions, you know that we have a very unique opportunity here where at the end of this, well, I guess tomorrow, the girls will start working on their communique. And the communique really is designed to be not a wish list, but if you really are serious about investing in girls and women, here's what you should do. And yesterday we talked about jobs, growth, and investment from the opportunity gained angle. Today, we're looking at the issue of the eradication of early forced marriage, also referred to as child marriage, from the opportunity lost. If we don't do something about this, we're losing many opportunities. So you've got 21 girls who are going to put something in a communique. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to convince them what they should say, and if you do it well enough, you might actually see your words in a communique. So you've got a captive audience, and you've got a captive audience that is quite determined to elevate the role of women and girls in society. So go for it. I mean, you guys are about advocacy, and they are going to be advocates. So I think this is a great opportunity for you.
Thank you very much. I love having captive audiences, and I think this group of delegates, you guys have an absolutely fantastic opportunity. I'm a big fan. I'm actually wearing the Girls 20 Summit at the moment, the T-shirts at the moment.
Stand up. Let's see. Just kidding.
Well, there we go. So I'm a huge fan. And one of the things I think that we are at a time where there is a huge amount of interest on the issue of child marriage. People are starting to talk about it. No one was talking about child marriage, as we mentioned earlier. And people are starting to talk about it at the international level, at the regional level. And you guys, as part of your communique, you can really show that girls from all around the world see this problem of child marriage as an issue that stifles the development of your sisters and stifles all of their ability to actually thrive and become contributing members to society. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a high-level panel that put together a series of recommendations to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. And this high-level panel made the case that actually in the next series of development goals, so whatever will come after the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, there needs to be a very specific goal that's focused on empowering girls and women and achieving gender equality. And as part of that goal, they see that actually ending child marriage is something that it's an indicator that can be used to measure progress against that goal. And I think this is fantastic recognition from this high-level panel on not just the scale of child marriage, but also how it's so intimately linked to issues such as access to healthcare, access to education, the opportunity to actually lead fulfilling lives, and the opportunity, and how much it's linked to the issue of poverty as well, and just how much it is a fundamental human rights violation. And so I think within your communique, you can echo some of that and really make the case to your leaders, to the G20 summit, and to all the people that you're advocating to, that this is not just an issue that's coming down from this rarefied world of a high-level panel of experts, but really it's an issue that is coming through to leaders from the girls themselves who find this absolutely unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Delegates, do you have any questions? Because I can continue to stand up here and ask all of mine. Yes, Ashani.
Hi, I'm Ashani and I'm a delegate from India. I was just wondering, like in India, there's a very changing trend of like, although child marriage still exists, it's in mostly the rural areas, and in urban areas, although we don't have child marriages where like women get, married before 18, but then we still have women and girls married, let's say at the age of 20 and 21, and that is often forced by their parents. And when they get married, the consequences like domestic violence, and even if the woman is all educated up to the class 12th, there's a huge amount of men backlash in the terms like, even if the woman starts working, there's intense beating and, domestic violence happening in the house. So I was just wondering, what are the ways to tackle this kind of situation where it is not legally child marriage, but women is still not empowered, even though she has education till class 12 because of the social norms and traditions?
And are you asking that of Lakshmi or from Kakenya?
I would love to hear from any.
So Kakenya, why don't we give you first shot at, and then Lakshmi will get you to answer as well, please.
Thank you. I think, this is where we really look at a holistic program of empowering a woman, empowering a girl, like from a younger age, because, it's one thing they delay marriage, but then, like, my mother used to be abused by my father, and it's a thing that has to happen. And I think when Lakshmi was talking about empowerment, it's really about how to stand up and say no. I look at the girls that I have in our school. They are saying no to being, to being cut, to go through female genital cutting. That's a voice they are raising, and I think it is something that has to be told to them and being taught to them when they are young, because the society has really put girls to be very inferior. And this even happens in schools. You find girls are not even answering questions. They are always shy. They can't, stand up and say, this is what I want, because they've been put in a certain category. In my own village, that's how it was. A girl cannot question a father or a male of anything. If they say, this is what we want, you just follow. But if we are able to teach them how to stand up, how to say no, how to speak up, and how, for me, I normally say, in our community, we are told to look down when you're being spoken to. And that's one way that people are taking your power. And what we've done in our school especially is telling the girls to look up, because that moment they're able to ask questions, they're able to start challenging things, they're able to really speak up. And I think that is very critical. And also to teach them about their rights, because once you know your rights, you're able to speak, and you're able actually to go look for help. And so that is what I would say, and I think Lakshmi would have lots to say. Thank you.
Lakshmi, do you have anything to add to that? We have about 2 more questions to go in about 10 to 12 minutes, but please, if you have something to add, go for it.
Okay, I'll just add very quickly. I mean, I completely agree with everything Kakenya just said. I think it's also really important to make sure that some of those dialogues also take place with the boys themselves, so that it's not just a question of empowering the girls, which is something that's incredibly important, but also really starting to build up this idea among the boys that actually you don't have to prove your masculinity by hitting people. That actually the girls are your partners. And that it's really trying to work on changing some of these social norms that have led to many of these practices. And I think the other thing, just very quickly to add, is that it's important. With some of these sorts of approaches, that we really try and tackle this issue at a number of different levels, and make sure that we're really addressing some of the different reasons why some of these things happen. So on the one hand, really working with the girls themselves, with the boys, with the communities, with the parents, with the village elders as well, on just changing some of these ideas about how girls are supposed to behave, how boys are supposed to behave, what a marriage is supposed to look like, etc. Changing some of that, but then also working at the broader level, perhaps at the regional level, at the national level, and at the international level, to change some of the more structural factors that underlie some of these behaviors and some of these practices. So that might be through laws, that might be through changing some of the curricula in schools, building greater awareness at that bigger level on the impact of violence, etc., and really trying to address all the different causes of these sorts of practices.
I see all the few of the delegates taking notes, and one of the things that they are, you're right, challenged to do is to figure out how, in their own regard, can they put this on the map of G20 leaders. So we have a question from Marwa.
Hello, I am Marwa representing Saudi Arabia. My question is for you, Lakshmi. As you mentioned earlier, that a lot of countries use religion as a cover for them. For me, as a girl that lives in Saudi Arabia, what is the first step that I can do to help my community for this problem? Thank you.
So I would say, I think that was directed to me. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, very quickly, what I would say is to really, no religion actually encourages child marriage. This is something that's really important to keep in mind. People often use religion as a way to close off dialogue and to stop conversations. But it's really important that the child marriage is not endorsed by any world religion. And I think just starting to talk to people around you about that fact is something that can be very helpful in at least starting to get people to think about the idea of why is it that this is a practice that's so common, and that's one thing, particularly on the religion angle. I think also building up some awareness in the people around you. I'm not entirely sure who you have access to, who you can start sharing messages with, but really building up awareness of the incredible negative consequences of child marriage is also something that can be incredibly helpful. It's one thing that I know I find in my work when I share some of the statistics linked that show how much more likely a girl is to have all kinds of health problems and maybe even die if she gives birth early, how child marriage is linked to poverty, all of these things. When you start talking about these issues, people start paying attention. They start realizing that actually child marriage, you can't just leave it in the cupboard, you can't just ignore it as a problem, but it has some fundamental consequences for the health and well-being of societies as a whole, not just the girls themselves. So really starting to open up that kind of dialogue, I think, is a very important first step.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left, 2 questions left, so please ask your question very briefly, and we'll try to get through both of them.
Okay, my name is Alina, and I'm representing Russia, and I want to address my question to Kakenya. So I've never met a person or woman and girl who was forced to marry, and I can't even imagine that happen in Russia. So I don't have inside knowledge, and I want to ask, like, how do parents feel when they force them child to marry someone, and is the poverty just one reason of them doing them child unhappy, making them child unhappy, or because to solve the problem you need to have you need to know the reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was lucky because I avoided my marriage actually when I was young. But most of the parents, it's not just poverty, it's also there is the pride that I was talking earlier about. When a girl is married young, in my community there is the dowry. So when a girl is married to another family, the family gives cows to the other family. And the other reason is that most of the time the parents are saying, why should we educate a girl who is going to be married into another family anyway? So they will tend to say, you don't need to invest the money of sending the girl to school, but let's send her to be married. And at the end, sometimes the cows or the wealth they get from marrying the girl, they use to educate the boy. There are other reasons, of course, of protecting the girl. For example, they are saying they don't want a girl to be pregnant before she's 18. It's a very shameful thing. Or if a girl starts becoming mature, they see that as a threat, the boys might, rape her, she might be pregnant, and that's more shameful. So they would rather marry them off earlier. There are other reasons that, as I was saying earlier, poverty, of course, is another reason that, they don't have enough to, they don't have enough money to send them to school or to keep them in their homes. So they would rather just give them away. It also varies from community to community. And I think in my community, people normally say it's a pride to have many girls because you'll have many cows, but they marry them off early. And then they say the boy is carrying the name of the family. So that's another good thing to have a boy. And, there are a lot of things that really prevent girls, make them getting married young. So most of the things are the ones I've discussed. But, I think for me, I advocate a lot about educating them and making sure they stay in school beyond primary school so that they are able to learn and they're able to go to high school and college.
So I really, we have 2 minutes, so you'll have your question, but I really like how you sort of explain the financial ties, and I think that's really important. It gives us an opportunity to figure out how do you actually do the linkage when you're talking to two G20 leaders and saying, look, there is actually a role in this. It has to do with the finances of a family, and what is it can be done to actually remove that incentive to marry a girl off. Sumaya, you have the last question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sumaya, and I'm representing the African Union, but I'm from Tunisia. Well, in Tunisia, we don't have this early child marriage since 1990s, but I always have that thought. What do you think about governments that, even though there are laws that prohibit child marriage, still don't take action? And something else, what do you think about the laws that are nowadays in the Arab world that say that even if a girl is raped, she has to marry her rapist?
So which of you can take that? Lakshmi, I think you're being asked to take that one.
Sure, happy to take that. So the first question was about first I also just want to say that child marriage does happen in both Tunisia and in Russia as well. So again, it's a global problem, and it happens in some of the most unlikely places where you don't necessarily think it happens. On the question of the laws, many countries indeed have laws on the books, but in many countries there are a whole series of loopholes around these laws. So, in some places you can, the age of marriage will be 18, but you can get married at any age if you have parental consent. In other places, the constitutional law says 18, but then there's sort of a law that's linked to religion. There's a law that's linked to just common practices as well. And so there are plenty of ways to go around the official law. And here, and this is where, again, I think it's really important for you as a group to be advocating on this issue. There's a question of political will, because in many of the countries, there's just not that much of an interest in actually enforcing these laws. And so I think that's something really important to push for, to make sure that the laws, first of all, that there's no loopholes within the laws, but then that the laws that are on the books, that there's enough resources put in by the government to actually make sure that these laws are going to be enforced. And so what does that actually mean? That doesn't just mean that the government or the minister says, yeah, now we're really going to be strict about this. It also means that you have to put in place systems to actually make sure that births are registered, because in many places parents will say, oh yeah, my daughter is 18 and she's actually 12 or 13, but there's no official record of when she was born, there's no official registry. And so it's very hard to prove that. And also to put in place systems of marriage registration. That's also something that's incredibly important. But also there need to be the legal provisions so that if someone wants to make a complaint, that they know where they need to go, that the girls, that their communities also need to be made aware that these laws do exist, that law enforcement officials need to be trained to make sure that they understand that these laws are on the books and the importance of actually addressing claims that come from whether it's girls themselves or from families or friends or whoever it is, and that there are provisions put in place for places for girls to go if they are trying to escape from a marriage, because oftentimes, even if a girl has the courage to actually step away from a marriage, there may be nowhere for her to go, and she may be stuck there because there are just no other alternatives. So it's addressing the legal aspect, yes, but it's really addressing it in quite a comprehensive manner. That's something that's incredibly important. The other question that you asked is that one of the reasons why this is also very important from an advocacy perspective is that you're right, there are some countries where they're actually going backwards. You made a comment about a girl who's raped who then has to marry her rapist. There was actually very recently a big case in Malaysia that's still actually ongoing about that exact situation where a 40-year-old man tried to escape a rape charge by marrying a 13-year-old girl who he had raped. This is just completely unacceptable, obviously, and I think it's important for us as a global community, on the one hand, to really, first of all, make sure that these kinds of abuses are being highlighted in the media, in other ways, so that people are aware that this is happening. I mean, in Malaysia, again, now, this is a case that is actually being addressed, mainly because there was a huge outcry about it by civil society and by concerned citizens. So that's something that you guys can definitely do, is really share the word about some of these abuses that are taking place, and almost in a way demand that your leaders act on them, and are put on the spot and have to actually respond and have to come up with a reason, first of all, for why they're not doing anything about this, and hopefully that will push them to actually address these issues.
Lakshmi and Kakenya, I think we could probably spend a couple more hours with you. Unfortunately, we don't have that time, but we are going to let you guys go, and we're going to watch the Girls Not Brides video, Lakshmi. So thank you very much for sending that to us. Thank you both for joining us. Kakenya, we're going to send you a T-shirt and make sure that you have a little souvenir of your time with us. But listen, on behalf of the delegates, this is an incredibly important issue. And you've both given us so much to think about, and I know that the girls will go on and figure out how they wrap this together. So on behalf of the delegates and our guests, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now we are going to take a look at a video, as I mentioned, that it comes to us from Girls Not Brides. So please turn your attention to our screens.
$10 million girls across the world get married every year.
In South Asia, nearly half of all girls marry before they're 18.
It's like killing someone's soul. It's not only kidnapping their childhood.
शादी करने से हमारा लाइफ ही खराब हो जाएगा, क्योंकि शादी तो डेली हो रहा है, जब चाहे जब हो जाएगा, लेकिन पढ़ाई तो जब चाहे जब नहीं हो सकता है। जैसे नर्स हो या डॉक्टर, यही सब बनना चाहते हैं।
शादी 14 साल की उम्र में हो गई। उस समय हमको ये भी नहीं पता था कि शादी का पूरा मतलब क्या होता है। जो परेशानी हम झेले हैं वो ना झेले, इसलिए हम जागृति से जुड़े हैं।
We really care about girls not marrying too young, because there is a big risk that they will die if they are pregnant too young, or the baby will die. So we have formed a big partnership around the world. Many organizations who are coming together to say we must give girls full opportunity to stay in school, full opportunity to develop, and girls and boys must not marry until at least the age of the law.
Child marriage is violence, and the violence that is happening with the consent of the society.
We here have all experienced the potential of change in our lifetime. And we know that when wrong practices abound, they can be changed. They can be changed by people themselves, they can be changed by communities, they can be changed by awareness.
Imagine what would happen when women and girls are set free.
Girls Not Brides is a movement whose time has come.
It's like different dots that you have, and you link them, and it makes a network. And the network covers up maximum area with maximum change.
Change is possible, and I have seen change taking possible in my country. My own mother married at the age of 16, while her mother married at the age of 14, but my sister married at the age of 21.
There is potential that all men can come in this way of saying no to unfair traditions, unfair norms that affect lives of girls and women tragically.
तक ही ख़त्म कर पाएंगे, क्योंकि एक साथ रहेंगे, एक समर्थन बनकर, एकजुट बनकर किसी भी मंजिल को पार कर सकते हैं.
You empower your girl, she becomes your future.
Now it's time to let girls fulfill their potential and to build a better world.
So while we wait for Nyaradzayi to join us, I was watching the faces of the delegates, and when we first started this conversation, I said, before the Girls 20 Summit, how many people had heard about it? You guys all put up your hands. We had a couple of other questions. And then a couple of the delegates, I thought your questions were fantastic in that you said it doesn't happen in my country, and Lakshmi actually said it does. So how does that make you feel? I mean, it's kind of shocking, right? So tell me how you feel about that. Who's got the mic? We've got a couple minutes before we have our. So why don't we pass the mic down here? Yeah.
I felt like shocked because I've never heard of anything like that around my city, about where I lived before, and know about this, that it happens. My country make me like sad, shocked, and oh my God, I can't believe it happens in my country too.
And do you feel that you can now you have some more information to go back and sort of say
make all the Brazilian people know about this. I think it's not about me. I think if I tell this to my to people in Brazil, they'll be like me, shocked.
Yes, at the very back, Jenny.
When you initially asked, does child marriage happen in your country, I kind of raised my hand and I was unsure. And the example, I was unsure because I know that Mormons in America, that happens, child marriage still happens. And I was shaky about raising my hand because I thought, this is their religion. They get to do whatever they want. And after hearing Lakshmi speak and Kakenya speak, especially about addressing religion head on, not to be confrontational about it, but saying, hey, you can't hide behind your religion. You can't use it as a shield to run away from these moral issues that affect all of us. Yeah. So anyway, I think the point is that I'm shocked, and that it's broken a lot of barriers for me in terms of thought process and being critical of what's happening within the borders of one of the most influential and powerful countries, the U.S. And I think a lot of Americans think very similarly to me when it comes to this issue within our boundaries, because they too think, it's a religious one. Yeah. We shouldn't get involved.
Yeah, or it's not happens here. It's not our problem. Right. It's interesting because when we first started to talk about this issue, a reporter said, "Well, you live in Canada. Why do you care?" And it's sort of the same feeling. How can you live anywhere and not care? So somebody else. Who hasn't spoken that would like to? The floor is yours. Go ahead.
To be honest, I feel ashamed because something like this is happening and I don't even know about that. And people around me, they don't even know about that. But right now I feel responsible. So at first I need other people to know about that, and then we should take an action.
Yeah, and I think what Lakshmi was saying is awareness. It's hard to believe, but it is quite possible that lots of G20 leaders aren't aware just how prevalent it is. You'll see that as we work our way through the day, the agenda has actually been designed to first build awareness, and then our next guest will talk to us about what they're actually hearing around the world amongst girls, and then you'll hear about it from a research perspective. So, we're ready for our next guest, but I'm glad to hear you say that because a lot of it is about awareness. We'll come back, we'll have another chance to talk about how you guys feel, but I am very pleased to present to you a woman that I just recently met. So for the introduction, I was going to say a lot of emotional stuff because she really moved me when I met her. But I'll stick to the official stuff. Nyaradzayi Gumbonzvanda, sorry if I messed that up. I really shouldn't because, we're African sisters from another mother, is the General Secretary of the Worldwide YWCA, and she is joining us from Geneva. Nyaradzayi, can you see and hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Farah, and I can see the amazing delegates that you have in the room.
They're all waving to you. Now listen, when I had a chance, I've sort of been stalking Nyaradzayi for a little while, I think, probably about 6 or 7 months, and I'd met Nyaradzayi through a mutual friend over the internet, and I went and did my research, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to have to do, but if I have to fly to Geneva to meet this woman, I will, and that's exactly what I did. And after my meeting, I walked away and I thought, this woman is an absolute powerhouse. She has done so much in her life. I don't even know where to start, but what I would say is she is trained as a human rights lawyer, and has extensive experience in conflict resolution, which I think lots of people see today, but at the time that when you were doing it, probably people didn't understand how important that discipline came to be. And in 2007, Nyaradzayi joined the Worldwide YWCA, which everyone here in this room will know this organization. There's no doubt in my mind, but just for those who are maybe watching from home, this is probably one of the largest network of young women who are leading social and economic change in 125 different countries. So you're not busy at all. And it's great that you could make the time to join us today. But, Nyaradzayi didn't come to this position without a lot of hard work, without a lot of training, and she spent some time at the United Nations. So I'm going to stop, giving you what I think is Nyaradzayi by Farah Mohamed. I will turn the mic over to you immediately and ask you to sort of introduce yourself the way you want to be introduced and tell us, how do you manage to galvanize 125 different countries? I'm trying to galvanize 21 young women. I think they're probably galvanizing me. So please, over to you and explain to us what's the magic potion that you've been able to get all of your members to really take hold of this issue.
Thanks so much, Farah, and my very warm greetings to the amazing delegates for the 2013 Girls Summit there in Moscow. I'm so excited to be joining this discussion. Let me just start by what drives me. Is these young women in that room and the young women in the world, they just drive me every day to do what I do, because I know that each one of the women in the world, each one of the girls in the world, each one of the young women in the world, they have a dream, they have a passion, they have skills, they have knowledge, but also they are looking for opportunities, they are looking for possibilities. So for me, that drives me every day to be a leader of the World YWCA. As you have said, we are in 125 countries. I've just come from Canada, so
Yay.
Hi to the delegation from Canada. And we reach 25 million women and girls in the world. And every day to wake up and say, how do we connect the dots? How do we connect the energy of the millions of women around the world? So when you invited me to this panel, I wanted to maybe reflect on a couple of things. First, in terms of how the Girls 20 Summit is an amazing community mobilization of the voices of young women, especially to address the issues that we've just been discussing around the rights of young women to make decisions about their lives. I know we are discussing about early forced and child marriage, but ultimately it is about young women being able to make fundamental decisions about their lives and having the necessary opportunities and the necessary knowledge and the necessary support around them for that to happen. So this Girls 20 Summit for me is very critical. It's part of the possibilities that we have for young women, for girls around the world to be part of the discussion. In the World YWCA and the YWCA movement, we believe that girls and young women should have a safe space within which you do crucial conversation. Whether that crucial conversation is about employment or crucial conversation about education or about relationship things, or about the struggles of going through life, about just being a citizen in your country and a global citizen. We believe that safe, empowering spaces for girls is critical. And that is what we do all the time in the YWCA, is to be a space within which young women and girls can come together. The second piece, which is very critical for us and which links to the discussion, is around mentorship and support. And that mentorship and support comes from peer to peer, girls to girls. It also comes from the perspective of skills. What skills do you need? What knowledge do you need? How do you get a mentor to enable you to do that? But also, I think, to come back to the discussion that we are having today on early forced and child marriage, is how can girls have somebody they trust, whom they can talk to about difficult personal issues? Because as you heard Kakenya speak, she needed to talk to somebody to enable her to escape child marriage. So for us, the issue of mentorship is also about having people you trust in your lives, whom you can converse with, whom you can confide in, and who can treat that with confidentiality and with the support that you need. So the third and the fourth, which is critical for us, is around education. When we talk about community action, is education and education and education. And that education is not just book education. It's not just learning ABC. It's learning about the world. It's learning about the systems of how the world runs itself. I think for me, it's amazing that we have a great group of young women from the G20 countries plus in that room to learn around how the G20 works as part of the critical systems of decision and for influencing. And so I'm also looking forward to the discussion around what will come out as the key messages for the community. So education and learning is both about having the necessary skills for career, for opportunities in your lives, but it is also about negotiating yourselves in the world today as a citizen and as a global citizen, and negotiating at the private, very, very private, personal, but also negotiating in the public, and also negotiating with regards to friends and other networks. So Farah, this is just some preliminary reflections in terms of the amazing G20 summit that is going on.
No, thank you very much for that. I was caught by a couple of things, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because I know you can do it. You've got 125 countries to choose from, but I'd like you to really drill it down for us. Give us an example of an initiative that's happening in one of these countries that is dealing very effectively with the eradication of early forced marriage. What are they doing? How did they get started? As precise as you can, because what we're looking at here is if in fact some of these delegates want to go home and they want to start their own initiative to eradicate early forced marriage, it's always best to learn from what's out there rather than try to figure it out on your own. So I'm going to put you on the spot. You're going to have to pick one of the many programs you have, but please tell us a little bit about the program, because I know that earlier today I asked people, are you shocked that it exists in your country? And I bet you some of these young women are going to go back and say, that's the issue I want to work on. So I've bought you enough time. Now tell us what really works.
Yes, I would like to share a couple of country examples from the world perspective. I'd like to talk about the situation in Zambia, and then I'd like to talk about what the YWCA of Canada is doing in Yellowknife, working with the Inuit communities and the indigenous communities around girls. It's not about child marriage, but it's about giving opportunities to girls, because I think earlier was a question around teenage pregnancy and opportunities, just for us to connect the dots. And I would also like to share about our work in Taiwan, which is around trafficking and migration in the region. So these are the three practical examples I would like to share in terms of our experience. In Zambia, the YWCA has a very integrated program in the communities, in the rural areas, which creates space for girls to come together, working together with the schools, but also offering opportunity for girls who are out of school. Because usually it's easier to reach girls who are in school. You can do a girls' club in school, but for the young women who are out of school, it is much more difficult to reach them. So the YWCA runs a program where the young women who are out of school come to the YWCA twice a week, and those who are married already but they are girls, they also come to the girls' clubs, to the young women's clubs, because it's very important that we both address the prevention aspect, but also we create opportunities and support to those who are already in marriage, but who still want to go to school. They still want to live a life out of violence, but to negotiate their own relationships. So in Zambia, what we do is a couple of things, 5 things that we do in the program. One is a space within which the young women can talk about their situations. And some of the girls have come, like we've heard from Kakenya, saying they're under pressure within the family. The YWCA brings the family for a discussion together with the girls to say, this is what is happening. This is what she has shared with us. We think there could be other opportunities for this girl to continue to go to school. What is the pressure? To just try to understand the causes that are there within the family. The second piece that the YWCA in Zambia does, in addition to the safe space, is to work closely with the Ministry of Health and the police. So that if there are cases where a young woman has experienced violence or violation, has been violated, like in the case of sexual abuse, the girl is able to receive the necessary counseling and medical services. But also if it is already a criminal case, there is an immediate referral to the police. So it's an integrated service working together very clearly with the public institutions. The third layer of our work is around legislation. The YWCA works together with other NGOs in Zambia to push for legislation. Only last month, we had Zambia passed a law saying we want the age of 18 for girls, for marriage to be at age 18, and also that there is going to be a national campaign for the next 3 years around implementation of that law and addressing that issue. So for us, the issue of having a necessary legislative environment that addresses the issues of child marriage is a critical part of the community action. But for that to happen, it is not only the adult women and men, but also for the girls themselves, for the young women themselves to be the advocates, to be the leaders of championing the issue. Because in the YWCA, we believe that it's important to shift from just vulnerability of young women to leadership of young women, because we know young women have the solution to the issues that they are confronting. So in Zambia, that is part of our critical work that we are doing with some of the amazing women like Inonse, like Chongo Mwila, and others who are there in the community, engaging with their government. The fourth approach that we take is working with the religious and cultural leaders and opinion makers in the community, because it's important to change the norms. It's important to re-clarify that the values and cultures anywhere in the world are not there to reduce the dignity of girls and young women, but should be there to protect their rights and to facilitate their rights. And as I have also heard, and as you have heard Lakshmi say, that we have to continue to say, which religion can any faith community out there raise their hand and say, we support child marriage, we support forced marriage. I think that is a global ask that we can make to the faith communities, because I don't think there's any which can raise their hand and say, yes, we do. But we feel it is either a manipulation or misinterpretation. And therefore, we have to keep the record straight and be able to push for faith leaders, for religious leaders, for cultural leaders to say no to early forced and child marriage as part of the global advocacy. And in Zambia, that is part of the work that we are also doing. The fifth approach that we take is working with the media. We believe that it is very critical. The role of the media today, including social media, is very, very important as part of the community actions to fighting, to early marriage, to prevention, but also to supporting those who are in marriage. The more we tell the stories, the more we are able to understand the magnitude of the issue. And in the YWCA, we always say one-child marriage is not, we should not condone. So it should not be a question of numbers. We know that each day 39,000 girls are married off. We know that each year 14 million girls are married off. We know that within a decade we may have 142 million of our girls in early or forced marriage. That is unacceptable. Every girl must have a chance in life. That is what we believe in. So in the YWCA in Zambia, we are taking a very concrete approach of community action, from awareness, referral services, safe space, integrated approach with healthcare and legal services, advocacy on legislation, and also the work with the media. We also
Nyaradzayi,
in Zambia for a Pan-African.
Nyaradzayi, I see part of the reason I asked you to come on this panel is because you have such wealth of knowledge, but we've got about 15 minutes, and I know that the delegates want to get to you with some questions. So it's almost embarrassing that I'm thinking I can actually cut you off, but I am going to cut you off and ask that if you wouldn't mind, we're
like to listen to the questions, definitely.
Yeah, well, you're going to love some of these questions because they're sort of moving in their seats and ready to ask. So I'm going to go to the floor, and please, if you don't mind, I don't want them to lose the knowledge you wanted to share. So we're going to try to keep the questions really short and the answers short so we can get through as many. And then if we have more time, of course, I'll come back to you and have you tell us about, I think you said Taiwan, and of course, Canada. I want to hear what's going on in Canada. So please, who has a question for Nyaradzayi? Yes.
Yeah, hello, I'm Putri from Indonesia. In Indonesia, the government let the girls will marry in 16 and the boy in 19. Actually, sometimes the girls feel ready to marry in their early young age because of love, maybe unmarried, pregnant, maybe. So is that so we should let them to marry as the personal choice, or I worry about the right or freedoms like that.
Yes, thank you. I think from our work in Indonesia, with the YWCA in Indonesia, one of the critical issues you are raising is around education and economic opportunities, and whether also the girls can make a personal decision. I think that is one of the issues around child marriage, is around giving opportunities for education, for economic empowerment for girls, but also that at times the families are poor and therefore look at marriage as an option. And I think that is where we have to address the issues of poverty as an underlying issue.
So Nyaradzayi, I'm going to go to Ellie next for her question, but I think that's an interesting observation, is when we're looking again at how do we inform G20 leaders, maybe one of the possible recommendations is to really put the spotlight on poverty, because that is a driving issue toward families making these choices for girls rather than the girls having the option to choose for themselves. So I just park that, and I'll go to Ellie and ask you to ask your question, please.
That was kind of my point, what Farah just said then.
Sorry.
But I also have another one, which is I've just Googled it and looking at like different countries and the ages, and it seems that pretty much every country has one age for boys, and then for girls it's 2, maybe 4 years younger than that. Are there any kind of schemes going to average that out? Because like according to the report that I was reading, in India they're starting to do that, but like no other country seem to realize that it should be equal.
Great question. Nyaradzayi?
Yes, this is a fundamental question that you are raising. It's an issue that we are in the YWCA and also through Girls Not Brides pushing, including in the Human Rights Council, that there should not be differential age groups for boys and for girls, because what it does is to give more opportunities for boys and less opportunities for girls. So it means girls are being married off early, they lose education, they are much younger, and it has a lot of other implications. So the huge advocacy is that globally, our countries must have the age of marriage according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and which states that age is 18 for both boys and for girls We need equal opportunity for our boys and our girls in the world, and not to reduce the age of marriage for girls. And that is part of the advocacy we have to continue to do. And again, it links with the issue that Farah has raised around what the G20 countries can do, is that in pushing for an issue like poverty and economic development, it has to do with investing in young women, and part of that investment is changing laws that limit economic capabilities and options for our girls.
Okay, Sumaya, you have a question.
Hi, my name is Sumaya and I'm represent the African Union, but I'm from Tunisia. So, well, it's more like a remark more than a question. In developing countries, usually the police departments are one of the most corrupted departments, and since that is the rule of the stronger and the patriarchal society thing, I mean, it's not safe to a little girl to go there, to like ask them for help or ask them to protect her. What do you think?
Yes, I think we are raising a very important issue, because from the relation, let me start with the African Union. The African Union has just celebrated its 50th anniversary, or in the process, and is saying we need a prosperous Africa, which is at peace with itself. There cannot be a prosperous Africa at peace with itself if young women and girls continue to experience child marriage. And secondly, that the issue of quality of services. The quality of services is very important, whether that is legal services or health services, and therefore corruption undermines quality and access to services. And therefore it is a critical issue to address. And again, the relationship between the G20 and the African Union, in that relationship, the G20 and the African Union must place this issue as part of the key priorities for that relationship that exists.
Great. Now we're going to go to Violette.
Hi, my name is Violette and I represent France. So in France, there's this kind of big issue where oftentimes immigrants' families who have lived their entire lives in France, their daughters live like 18 years in France. They have all their education in France, and then at age 18, these families send them back in their countries of origin to get married off. It's kind of like, I mean, girls like early marriages everywhere in the world, but in France, that's kind of like our big early marriage problem. So I was wondering what you thought about that, these families that kind of like send back their daughters to their countries of origins to get married when they have made kind of a life in another country. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important issue, because you are bringing an issue of migration and how communities live their cultures in the other countries to which they've migrated to, and why it is important for legislation for the protection of girls in the countries where they're living. So for instance, if a girl living in France is to be forced to go back to her country, she should get protection by the legislation in France. That is very important as the first step. But as we are also saying, the underlying issue is about the family whisking the child away to their country of origin. And this is where we need a multi-pronged approach, where the legislation across the continents, across the countries, should address this issue, but at the same time that we should address the cultural issues and maybe understand why that family, why there is still need for forced marriage when the family has other opportunities, because it stops to be just an issue of poverty. It means there are other underlying factors, and those are the factors that needs also to be addressed.
Thank you. Sophia, I think you have a question.
Hi, I'm from Mexico, and I think that one thing that I want to remark is that in Mexico is child marriage is very low, the rate, but the thing is the girls that are not forced, I mean the children that are married young is because they get pregnant before they get married, so usually they get married. So I don't know what would be a solution for these girls that are already married with her husbands. The husbands that are almost always the same age that hers, that share the responsibility of the child, but most of them want to get continue her studies.
We have the YWCA has programs in Mexico. We have a program in Naucalpan and in Guadalajara. And what you are saying is true, that the issue is more of teenage pregnancy. And once there's teenage pregnancy, the young girl would have to find ways of taking care of the baby, maybe together with the man who is responsible, or maybe not. So the issue is that we need to have good quality sexual and reproductive health programs for young women, where there is good information around sexuality, education, appropriate services for young people, and also that there is support when somebody has an experience with teenage pregnancy. That girl, that young woman should not be left on her own. We need support services within our communities, within our governments, in order to address the issue, because it is very traumatizing at times for the young women to drop out of school, to take care of the baby with no job, with no child care, and at times the family is very unhappy. And so we need a much more integrated support in a way that helps young women to have the opportunity to make good decisions about relationships, because it's about relationships, but it's also about sexuality education. And ultimately, we need good access to opportunities for young women and girls, because if young women and girls have opportunities, education, employment, livelihoods, they're able to negotiate relationships, because we know some of the young women enter into these relationships because they are also either exploited or they have limited choices. So I think the program that you have in the Girls 20 Summit on looking at how do we invest in girls is essentially also a preventive way for addressing issues like teenage pregnancy. So we need both a prevention programs, but we need support programs. It's not sufficient to prevent, because there are girls who are experiencing teenage pregnancy now or child marriage now who need support now.
Nyaradzayi, as the delegates think about their next couple of questions, I'm going to jump in. You alluded to a recent trip that you have taken in Canada. Next time, don't come to Canada unless I'm there, first of all. But on behalf of Morgan, who I'm sure was curious when you talked about this, can you please elaborate on what you were talking about in terms of, like, it's not lost on me that Canada does in fact have incidences of child marriage, but you spoke very specifically about the Aboriginal communities.
Yes, I was in Canada and was in Winnipeg, and we visited the youth center and also met with colleagues from Yellowknife. One of the young women who spoke to us, Shanine, is from the First Nation, from the Indigenous community. And she brought it very clearly to us that we must address in Canada the issues affecting young women from the First Nations, from the Indigenous communities, access to opportunities, the inequalities that exist, but also that at times, there is an assumption in the world that if countries have a good GDP, it results in equality of opportunities for all, which is not necessarily the case. We still have communities who do not have access in countries which are developed. So I would equally make a call and encourage you as you make a call to the G20 heads of states and summits that they should also create and support young women who are on the margins of society in the G20 countries, where some of those girls end up experiencing the same issues that we have discussed of exclusion, lack of access to education opportunities, or lack of, therefore, finding themselves with limited options for jobs and or experiencing teenage pregnancy. It struck me very much when I heard the story, but also to see what the YWCA and their girls space and the girls leadership program is doing in Canada. I was quite excited to see the opportunities that we also have as organizations to reach out to those who might be on the margins in countries like Canada.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I know that you had a lot more to share. So I think, delegates, do you have any questions, or can we give the floor? Yes, you do. Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Helen from China. So recently in the discourse of development, there's terms like top-down or bottom-up development, so more like a linear process. But an alternative way of looking at it is a more integrative, kind of non-linear way of the process itself. And because YWCA is such a huge network with so many different countries and different levels of engagement, so how do you think, how is this achieved in your organization, or what do you think this concept means to the G20 as well?
Thanks for that wonderful question. Yes, we need to have an integrated approach that listens and lifts the voices and the knowledge and the experiences that are in communities in a very fundamental way. I remember visiting China and coming to Nanjing and experiencing some of the issues and the lives that women go through. So I think we need that integrated approach where we are able to listen to the voices, but also we need an approach where the leadership is accountable. We need accountability fundamentally because at this moment in the world, our governments, including the G20 countries, they've committed to the Convention to Eliminate Discrimination Against Women. They have signed to agreements to do with the rights of the child, which includes the girl child. We were in Beijing in 1995, your own country, and we had this amazing Beijing conference on women where we identified the 12 critical areas of concern. But what we have seen recently is insufficient is that there are good policy commitments. We have good policies. They may not be sufficient, but they're there. But what is not ultimately being done is implementation. So even the discussion we are having around child marriage, in some countries the laws exist, but what is not there is sufficient programs to translate the policies into doable, impactful programs in communities. And that requires good resource allocation. So my call to the G20 would be prioritize your budgets in a way that you put more resources to programs that provide education and economic empowerment for girls and young women, and also for boys. But that is one practical way of an integrative program. An integrative program which is listening to what is needed in communities, but at the policy level, our governments putting in place the resources and the legislation. And the second piece of integration that I would like to talk about is that we live in a global village where there is movement of people. Our sister from France talked about migration, but equally, I see the migration happening as labor migration, as migration due to conflict. You know, people move from one country to another because of wars. It means fundamentally that the integrated approach we need is also to take care of each other across our borders. So we need global policies, global laws that can protect the girls, but also unleash their potential.
Nyaradzayi, I don't know if you can see the girls very closely, but as you've been speaking, they've been on their Nexus tablets looking up facts and figures about child marriage and World YWCA. So I think you've got some potential new partners for yourself. Listen, we only have about 5 or 6 minutes, and if the delegates don't have any other questions, I'll just do a quick check. No. One of the things that I love the most about the Girls 20 Summit is that we do have the ability to bring people like you in front of what I feel are going to be the next leaders of our globe. So tell us some stuff about you that is going to inspire these young ladies. You have an incredible background. We'd like to hear a bit more about you. I didn't have a chance to really talk about you, but what does success look like for you? What makes you tick? What makes you happy? What makes you, and I don't mean like, you get 7 hours of sleep or I think that stuff's important, but what makes you happy? You get on planes constantly. You have unbelievable energy. Tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you so much, Farah, for touching the sensitive piece about the heart. I think first is to know that in each one of us is a leader. You are a leader in your own life. Whatever decision you make every day about your life is a very important decision. So for me, that is the first spot, is to say, for the young women, for the girls, you are not leaders of tomorrow, you are leading today, because you are making decisions today. It might just be a decision of what you are doing this summer, but that is a decision because it shapes your life. The second is with my background, born in Zimbabwe, in the rural area, going to the city when I was almost a big girl. All the issues we talk about around poverty, around exclusion, girls who grow up in war, girls who are orphans, it's me. But what my mother said, and which I want to share with you, is that your personal circumstances, whether in poverty or whatever, should never rob you of your dignity. Your dignity is inherent, and your potential is inherent. What you need to do is to continue to reach out to protect your dignity, but also find people around you that can unleash your potential. So for me, the unleashing of the potential in each one of us drives me every day, because I know there is a great person, a great leader, a great innovator, a great entrepreneur, a great friend in each person in the world. But at times we just don't have the opportunity to unleash that potential. So I celebrate any initiative that reaches out to unleashing the potential. The third, just to share about myself, which has been an amazing experience and journey, is to be able to experience life in my village, asking where does the bus come from, and you can Google me on World Pulse and read my stories about my personal life, about my yellow dress with red buttons, about where does the bus come from, just to know a little bit about my background, but also that I have had this incredible opportunity to serve in my government as a law officer, to be able to lead in the United Nations as the regional director for UNIFEM, and to work with UNICEF, and to remain so engaged with the United Nations now, and to know that it is possible to move from a space of vulnerability to a space of leadership. And this is why, Farah, when you invited me, I said, for me, what drives me, for every young woman, every girl in the world, is that move from the space of vulnerability to the space of voice and to the space of leadership, because you are leaders.
Nyaradzayi, that is, I don't know what else to say, except that I think that is so inspirational advice. And if everyone sort of could take down that recipe, I think the G20 leaders could probably just move aside and we could just have our own G20 in September. But I'm not sure, and I should know this, but over the past couple of days, we've had the girls go through a number of different workshops, and one of them today was put on by Girl Up and by the United Nations Foundation, and they talk about leadership. And in the previous couple of days, they've heard from Norton Rose Fulbright, who actually had the girls go through their leadership assessment, where when you go through the Myers-Briggs testing, you learn about yourself, you learn about your capacities. Tell me, when you went through your own sort of process in life, did you have some of the same tools? I think the fact that Girl Up exists and they build these communities of young women actually is a game changer. And things like Myers-Briggs assessment tools will allow these girls to understand that they have capacities that perhaps they did not know about. How did you realize your leadership capacities? What tools did you have?
Definitely, when I was growing up, we didn't have Google Plus. So thank you to Google for creating this tool to enable young women to unleash their potentials. And a couple of tools that was available. The first tool was to be in a space with other girls. And for me, that was very important growing up, that I was not alone. I was able to be in a space, in clubs, in school, at university, to be in social justice groups. So that possibility of being with others who share the same values is very important as an approach. The second, which was very important for me growing up, is take every opportunity to learn. So if there are things to sign up for a half-day workshop, just go for it. And also don't go for things you know only. Explore the new frontiers. I would go to a training on things which have nothing to do with law, but maybe to do with economics or to do with medicine. Not because I just wanted to know other things which can inform my own life and my own career. So I think the tool of creating a learning plan for yourself and to go beyond the comfort zones is very important, so that you are always going beyond what you know and you are willing to explore the other. I think the last, which was very, very important for me, especially in the recent past, was to be able to have the possibility of using the online information, which is massive, and go to Nike Foundation website, go to UN Foundation tools, but also to have those tools which enables me, including spending time at Syracuse University, going through the Myers-Briggs test, but just to be able to be in a space where you get other tools to learn about the self and the other. The critical tools that I also found important was not just about knowing self-awareness, but managing relationship, conflict. How do you receive feedback? Because in the world you will receive feedback. Some of the feedback is not feedback you want to hear, but feedback which is important, which might not be feedback that I think your session was really not good. And you need to be able to say, so how can I improve on it, instead of taking negatively? So look for tools which addresses the uncomfortable issues of leadership, because that's also how you learn more. And those tools were so fundamental in terms of my own leadership skills, to know how to manage conflict, how to manage diversity, how to manage difference, but also how to receive feedback and how to give feedback. Because those critical tools, especially as a leader, are so essential. And also how to lead from a perspective of not seeking to do what is popular, but seeking to do what is right. Because at times what is right is not necessarily popular, but you need to be able to stand tall to your decision and be able to say the basis on which you made it, and then mobilize your teams around it, mobilize your constituency around it. But those are some of the fundamental tools that I found very important for my work. But ultimately it's the networks. And thanks, Farah, for coming to Geneva, for coming to meet with me, for just spending time and for us exchanging ideas. I'm just finding the Girls 20 Summit is one of the critical tools of influencing the G20 summits, the heads of states, because you are not just there as individuals, but you are there as an idea of lifting critical space that our governments need to listen to their citizens. And the young women, the delegates there, are a critical sample of the citizens within which the heads of states have to listen to as they shape policy and deliver programs. So I'm so excited to be part of the 2013 Girls Summit this year.
Well, Nyaradzayi, thank you very much. Actually, you're part of the Girls 20 Summit family now, so we're not going to let you off the hook anymore. We're going to have you drawn into what we do. And I want to just reflect really quickly before we say goodbye and say I think it's really important what you said about getting out of your comfort zone. When I was growing up, getting out of my comfort zone, unfortunately for my parents, meant trying to learn the drums, the guitar, and doing a whole bunch of other things that probably I was not well skilled to do. But I do think it's important to get out of your comfort zone. For some of the delegates in the room, that meant getting on a plane and coming to Moscow, which is the first step. So thank you so very much for joining us. Please, a round of applause for Nyaradzayi.
And my own applause to all the amazing events.
All right, take care. So now we are going to transition to a conversation with Jennifer Buffett. But before we do that, we do have a video we'd like you to see. It's called What If? I hope I have the right one. It's called What If? And it is not about child marriage. It's about the impact that the girl can have. And because the audience cannot see you, I'll let the girls get up while you watch this video and then sit back down. So let's roll the tape, as they say. So I want to thank Narrative Advocacy, a firm in Canada that's led by Amanda Alvaro, and Kathy Barnett for working on this video. In fact, the delegates have had a chance to work with Kathy, who is helping to write the communique. Usually she's in the country, but she meets with the girls every night or most nights to talk about their ideas, and she will be helping to present them with a communique. So I'm very pleased now. I think we've got Jennifer Buffett hooked up and ready to go. It is an absolute pleasure to have Jennifer Buffett with us. We'll wait until she appears on the screen anytime now. I could probably just talk about Jennifer Buffett, and she will join us when she does. So every year we've been very fortunate to have the NoVo Foundation involved. And it started off in Toronto when Pamela Schiffman, who leads the Girls Files for Jennifer Buffett and the NoVo Foundation, came to Toronto, and she was a panelist. And Pamela was another person, I'm going to sound like a terrible person, but Pamela was another person that I stalked from event to event to event, handed her my card and sort of said, we'd really like you to be part of the Girls 20 Summit. And she showed up, and we learned a lot about the NoVo Foundation. And during that time, it came to light that the NoVo Foundation is very strategic in how they spend not just their resources, but the time of their founder, and how they use their platform to talk about issues in partnership with other organizations that maybe would not necessarily get that kind of attention. So Jennifer Buffett's the president and the co-chair of the NoVo Foundation. She's joining us from New York City. I'm now going to stretch and tell you a little bit more about Jennifer. I met Jennifer, I guess the last time I met her was in New York City again at the CGI meeting that was put on by the UN, I think it was the UN Foundation. Oh, hi, Jennifer. I was just about to tell stories about you. Okay. Thanks very much for joining us. It's early in New York City, I guess is where you're beaming in from.
I am, yeah. It's not too early, though.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much. I was just explaining a little bit about NoVo Foundation and how you guys have been with us from the start, and how I sort of stalked Pamela Schiffman and had her come to Toronto, and then she joined us in Mexico City, and we're so incredibly pleased to have you with us and to talk to the delegates. You've got a group assembled of young women who are 18 to 20 years of age, who come from 21 different countries, and who are so eager to figure out what can they do with respect to child marriage. So I was just going to say that, you are a passionate advocate for girls. You serve on the board of the Nike Foundation, and you promote the Girl Effect, which they are now familiar with. And so we're coming to you from Moscow. The floor is yours. Please maybe just say a few words about the NoVo Foundation, and then we're going to jump into questions.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. I was watching the panel before this one, was just so impressed, and I can feel the energy all the way from Moscow to here, and I'm so sorry I'm not with you. Next year, I will be there wherever it is, I promise. But thank you so much for having me. The NoVo Foundation was born in stages. I started working in philanthropy in 1999, 14 years ago, with a relatively small amount of money, $100,000, that got me out in my community. And this was from my husband's family, and they gave us a Christmas gift of this fund, and we could spend it on a nonprofit organization, NGO, 501c3, we didn't know what that was. However we wanted. We could write one check or many, many checks. And I was a journalism major. I was always curious and wanted to know how things work. So I sort of put myself into places and areas in the city where I grew up in Milwaukee, where I was living at the time, that I had not spent a lot of time with, in different communities of color, in the disabilities community, in all different kind of communities that were maybe not where I grew up, but I felt I really needed to learn about, and immediately for some reason thought about philanthropy in terms of systems and our society, and why were some people able to have access to education, good schools, good jobs, and things like that, and other people maybe just across a river were not? Why was that? And so my philanthropy, again, got me out, and there's nothing better than, I think, in your work than experience and putting yourself right into the thick of things to learn with humility, and to really listen to people to find out how things were working and where things, frankly, fall apart. So I've had 14 years of traveling. I started in Milwaukee in a small location, and then went out and started working nationally, worked in indigenous communities, worked with adolescent girls in poverty who were first-time mothers. Interestingly enough, that has carried through my work at the NoVo Foundation, and then started to work and travel around the world to slums of Mumbai and Bangladesh, to urban and rural communities all over Africa, and just to learn and see again, what are the systems at work in the world that are maybe not working for us anymore, and how do we change them, and who will be the agents of change? And the conclusion that we came to after many years, again, of study, of travel, of listening, is that girls are going to be those agents of change. We absolutely believe that. We live in a world, unfortunately, that's been based on domination and exploitation of people, of places, of things that we want, of resources, and rampant competition. And I think that paradigm needs to change. And we see this playing out between the genders. You all know this. We do not have gender equity or equality between the genders. And frankly, until that changes, I think that paradigm is going to continue in the world. And I think problems, wars, shortages, and things like this are only going to escalate if we don't shift that partnership paradigm. by empowering and elevating and supporting the girls and women of this world.
So on that note, as you know, one of our tasks is to come together, build up our skills, hear from speakers like yourself about a number of different issues. And this year we've chosen the eradication of child marriage. And we're doing that in the perspective of if we do not eradicate child marriage, there's a serious opportunity lost. We all know the numbers. The delegates have heard from Nyaradzayi, they heard from Lakshmi, and they heard from Kakenya. So they know the sort of facts and figures. But I think what is really important is, you have resources, you have a platform. You could choose any issue that any issue you want to. So tell me, was it a moment? Was it a story? Was it a friend who sort of said, Jennifer, this is an important issue and one that you can make an impact on? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about why the NoVo Foundation and yourself have put this so high up on the priority list.
Yeah, great question. Again, it was experiential, and the opportunity also came. But there were so many places that I would visit where I would see girls, some of them very engaged and whatnot, and I would see maybe a group of girls off to the side, or who were hidden if we went to other parts of a village or something, and I saw a big difference. And what I kept seeing when I asked, so why do these girls feel or seem more withdrawn, or why are they not in school? And the answer was so often because they're married. They're married, and this is it. They have been, and they're not in a healthy relationship. They have become it was a transaction where they were not able to be in their families of origin. There weren't resources to keep them in school, and so they were married off. And it just became glaringly obvious, place after place, that this was then going to further a cycle of poverty, because these girls were children, and the girls were dying in childbirth because they were too young to bear children. And I just became outraged. I thought, this is just derailing generations of girls, whether they be individuals or we know it's 14 million girls or so a year, that we cannot afford, that we will lose, that could be healthy contributors, in the world, to their families, their communities, and that this really needed to change. It was a huge, we were calling it sort of trapdoor or problem in the system, in thinking that, again, I just saw so many problems as a result of it, and such unfairness, frankly, that to think that, it's interesting. I have a twin brother, so I think of myself as sort of a living gender experiment. And even in the United States, because I was, and there's 2 girls in our family and 2 boys. The boys, oddly enough, had businesses. They got insurance. They got to go to college. They had, they didn't have to work as hard in the summer. My sister and I had to put ourselves through college. I've worked since I was 14. These things have built up my skills and my knowledge of how to take care of myself, how to work in the world. So I'm grateful for those things, but there was a huge difference. And when I was going to college, and I was a very serious student, my parents were splitting up, and my dad came to me and had a very difficult conversation. He said, I'm going to take the boys, your mother's going to take the girls, and I'm not going to be able to pay for your college tuition. And I was horrified. I didn't understand it, and just ripped apart from this. And I said, Dad, why? And he said, you're only going to get married anyway. Why should I invest in you? And that, to me, when you talk about what the aha moment, that actually seed lived in me to this day, and does. That I've been perceived as, what about the contributions that I want to make in my life? And then in building my skills and abilities and contributions in the world. Even in my country, in the United States, this attitude exists. And I had just plowed ahead, but when I traveled around the world and I saw the same attitude again and again, yet with women that I had met who had, this had happened to at age 4 and 5 and 6 years old. I mean, can you imagine a 4-year-old not having a clue what was happening to her? Mm-hmm. Her life just sort of ending at that moment. It was just a huge moment for me. And then when Girls Not Brides campaign and the leadership started to form around this, I thought, we have to be involved in this. This is a moment, and we have to be involved. So that's why the NoVo Foundation is passionately, heavily invested for as long as it takes to really sort of crack open this issue, elevate this discussion, and really shift this. so this doesn't happen to girls in our world.
So first of all, thank you for sharing such a personal story. I mean, I think that really helps the delegates understand that no matter where you come from, everyone has challenges and opportunities, and you obviously turned yours into an opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to the delegates for questions in a few minutes, but one of the things that I wonder if you could tell us is, if we are truly going to end the practice of early child marriage, what do you think the priorities are? I mean, we've heard that education is important, and you've talked a lot about traveling around the world and seeing different perspectives. You're a very successful businesswoman. You have a very passionate philanthropic background. From the perspective of having seen with your own eyes what could actually be done, what do you think the priority is if we're really gonna stop this in our lifetime? Now, keep in mind, I'm 42, so I'm gonna hang on for a little longer. But truly, tell us a little bit about what you think really are the we must do this if we're going to go to this point.
Well, I think, Farah, I want to thank you for your work with G20 because you're in the sweet spot of it, and I think it is by bringing voice and consciousness and awareness to the issue and to girls, because I think girls have been primarily separated and invisible, and until that shifts with some of the, for example, G20 predominantly male global leaders, where they don't even think about adolescent girls, they're not thinking about girl children, the world that we have presently will continue, will be allowed to continue. Yep. And if we're going to shift this, girls are going to have to become visible, and they're going to have voice, and they're going to have to be able to share, whether it be through social network, the ability we have through social networks, video, writing, speaking, the reality and the stories of girls and women. Mm-hmm. That is not living in the consciousness of the world. What is the reality, and what are the life experiences of girls and women, and what does that mean, and what are the contributions we want to make? What's the world we want to create? I don't feel like that things can change until that awareness is really brought to the fore, mm-hmm. and fought for, and it is challenging the existing sort of paradigm and stories in the world. Mm-hmm. Education is incredibly important. Economic ability and stability, so that families are not forced to choose. If I send my son to school, what do I do with my daughter? I love her. I'd love her to stay in school, but I have no choice. I have to marry her off. Things like this are very real. Cultural fears around, will my daughter be married if I delay marriage? I mean, it's so complex. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about here is so complex. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, the opportunity and the priority really needs to be to elevate the stories, the realities, the importance of girls and what's happening to girls as a result of them not being in the dominant conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've given me a nice segue to go to our delegates for them to use their voice to ask their questions to you. So we're going to start with Morgan from Canada.
Hi. So you talk a lot about systems, which I find fascinating, and I'm wondering, taking today's topic of child marriage, what exactly changes about the problems but also the solutions when you adopt a systematic approach to these issues?
Ask me that again, because I really want to be thoughtful about the answer.
Well, you mentioned that when you were first examining issues of gender, you took a journalistic approach, you took a systems approach, and which I'm very curious about. And I'm asking what exactly changes about both the problems and the solutions, and what exactly this means in terms of taking a systematic approach.
Yeah, well, I think we have to look at the systems and how they're set up in terms of the imbalances. So again, if we're looking, pick a system, pick our education system, and what is happening there that is favoring boys, or where assets or resources, or just the alignment of that entire education system where there's the inequities. So it's not just individual sort of people or cases. And then I think systems of political systems, the inequity of representation, of family and community systems. Again, just not going in and saying this is sort of an individual problem and going and thinking that they're isolated incidences. It's taking a step back and looking at the entire ecosystem and forces at work in a holistic way to see where you can meet people where they are, where the needs are, so that you're not trying to sort of force, sort of like, here's an intervention Now here's the effect we were. I heard somebody talking earlier about the linearity of things. You know, we live in a world that is very linked. Everything is connected, right? And so I think it is up to us, especially as leaders and philanthropists, to understand the very complex ecosystems and systems and different levels of realities and things at play. Again, in the issue of child marriage, there are attitudinal realities, there are family systems, there are economic realities, there's economic systems that have fallen apart, and girls are getting a raw deal, and this is resulting in girls being married off and all sorts of hosts of bad things. You know, what's happening in our health system that could actually support promoting girls staying in school longer and marrying when they choose and having babies later in life when their bodies are ready, fully ready for that, and they have the support. That's what I'm talking about.
Jennifer, I'm going to jump in there before I go to Linda for her question. What you've just described, this holistic approach and how it's important to sort of connect the dots, is exactly what we're trying to do in Girls 20. If you look at our partnership list, we have people who are from the, I call it social profit sector, the private sector, and then government and foundations. And I think you're absolutely right. If you don't bring all these players together and systematically you take a chunk of the pie and you say, look, we're most effective on this, you work on that, but let's understand what each of us are doing, then it is silo work. We have many different partners. One of our partners is here with us today, and it's a new partner with us, and it's Caterpillar. And we had talked to them about what we try to achieve and what we try to do, and they immediately said, look, from our perspective, we actually need to make sure that we have a robust workforce to go to in the future. Well, that ties back to, if you take 14.2 million girls out of the system, that workforce has just come to be a little bit smaller, or a hell of a lot smaller. And so, I think the question's a fantastic one, because it's not just about Jennifer Buffett, who has an amazing platform. It's Jennifer Buffett who says, I can galvanize people, but I'm not going to do it alone, because it's more effective if I have the private sector. If I have the social profit sector, if the academic sector understands that there is a role to play, and the media. This has become such a huge issue now in the media. And yes, it's because people like Desmond Tutu and President Clinton and others have rallied around this. And you just hope that this doesn't become a trendy issue, that it stays. And the only way that it stays is, in fact, what you've just said, which is it has to be systemic. It has to be multi-pronged. So enough of Farah's way of the world, but I'll turn the mic over to Linda, because she's itching to get up, and then we'll get back to you, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm the delegate representing Australia. So I had two sort of questions today. The first one was, what kind of criteria does the NoVo Foundation use to determine which projects are best worthy of funding? And furthermore, can you name a particular project but the methods of which you really admire and you think that it poses best practice for development studies and development policy?
Great question. The criteria is we are not, like many foundations, a responsive foundation where people send us applications and then we sort through sort of a competitive process, the best ones. We've been very thoughtful and taken our time, or decided to take our time, about what are all our assets. Farah just named one. I think it's really important that philanthropists can play as a convener. We have a platform. We can open doors. We can get to certain people in the government sector, in the private sector, whatnot. Those are huge assets besides the money that we feel like we have in our toolbox that we really need to use. We really feel like we have, compared to resources in the world, just a little bit of resources to do something. So how could we maximize those resources? So our thinking in terms of criteria has been, we see so clearly the imbalance between the genders. We see that the world's girls need to be invested in, need to be valued. We need to get the word out that we cannot lose all that girls will bring to the world, which will be ended by things like child marriage and trafficking and things like that. It's too large a contribution, too important a contribution to lose. But who can we partner with, and what can we do? What needs to be done? in order to move that ball down the field, so to speak, in order to advance that. So we went searching, and there, through serendipity and through places like CGI where we met Farah, other convenings, we found other partners that could take pieces of this and together, like the Nike Foundation, bring very compelling communications and media to the issue to elevate it. And then we worked very intentionally to say, okay, if we're going to do this, if we have a shot at this, we need to work with grassroots girls. We need to get girls as part of this movement and energized. And we also have to get places like the World Bank and heads of state and the G20 countries, whatever, to understand the issue as well. So the criteria for us was self-imposed, but we always try to think, if we're going to make a difference, what are the sort of levels, again, in the ecosystem of things that need to happen or people that need to be reached or be brought on board, and what are the things that need to be done that maybe are not there, that we can bring to the fore in terms of, again, communications, building a portfolio of what, for example, in the girls' work, we have a portfolio of fantastic girl projects around the world that we're trying to bolster so that we can say to the world, this is what we know girls need in these settings, this is pretty much what it costs, and these are the benefits of these things. There's a lot to learn there about what girls need, and then to amplify girls' voices themselves. So this is a whole strategy. As we learn, we continue to iterate, get the feedback from our learning, and then look for opportunities to move our resources and hopefully unlock other dollars and other potential. So that's a very different way of working, but I would say that is how we've formulated our thinking and looked at this opportunity thus far.
And I think, Jennifer, I'll go back to the delegates for another question if they have one, but I'm struck by the fact that what you've just described, I don't know if you remember this breakfast, but in September, yourselves, the Ford Foundation, the UN Foundation, and I think it was Mrs. Sabanci, the Sabanci Foundation, had a breakfast. And it was in New York. It was probably, you're in New York and this is CGI and there are tons of events to go to and there are celebrities everywhere. And that room was packed. It was standing room only. And the reason for that is because you do have all of these people who are gathered around this issue, and you managed to bring in, and I don't know the relationship, and perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on the relationship with Mrs. Sabanci from Turkey, but there we had a new voice, and just by bringing in a voice that it was not North American, I think was a really nice eye-opener. And to your point about the funding, what I like is that it's not just up to one organization. It is so much stronger when an organization says, I'll put X, but it's not just dollars. We always say we're not a checkbook philanthropy. Girls 20 is not a checkbook philanthropy organization. If there's no content, we don't want the money. Because those two things really need to come together. But I might put you on the spot and just ask you to elaborate on how you brought this partnership to fruition between the Ford Foundation, yourselves, and the Sabanci Foundation, and I believe the UN Foundation was involved as well. I remember Kathy Calvin being in the room and being a go-getter on that one.
Exactly. That breakfast, ladies, felt like a significant turning point in this issue. With so many issues at a time in New York City in September, when there's so much going on at the UN with different philanthropic convenings on different issues, to have a packed room, and it was a fairly large room in New York City, with men, women of all different sort of backgrounds from different countries, from different foundations, saying this is important and speaking so passionately at 7 a.m. about it, I felt like, we've hit a moment, we've hit something in the consciousness. People are understanding the connections of this. Farah, thank you for giving me credit for bringing all those people together. That was not me at all, but we were early investors in Girls Not Brides, and with the elders, who Mary Robinson and Desmond Tutu in particularly really stepped up. They traveled, they talked with girls, went to places where early marriage is really a problem and affecting a large portion of the girls in that region, did their homework, and could speak so eloquently and powerfully and passionately. And the world knows, out of all the issues, for them to choose this and say this is important, people took notice. And so I think it's the combination of when resources and powerful people and powerful voice And the diversity of those things, I think, shows up, people take notice.
Yep. I think Linda has a follow-up question, and then we're going to have a time for one more from Jenny from the U.S., and then we're going to have to wrap it up, though we could keep you here all day.
Sorry, just to return to the second half of my question. I'm a development studies major, so I'm really interested in learning about like what kind of methods are the best practice for achieving outcomes. Do you believe that sort of grassroots action is more effective, or do you believe that top-down action coming from expert knowledge is more effective?
I mean, I think it depends what you're trying to achieve at what level and what scale. My instinct in answering your question and my approach and the values here of the NoVo Foundation is always to approach humbly at the grassroots and talk to people that are affected by whatever issue or in a place, because there's nobody better in terms of an expert than someone who's living in a geographic location or living something where an issue is playing out that you're curious about. And that, rather than somebody in a university thousands of miles away who's just focusing on this one element of a problem, it just almost seems ridiculous that we could solve things that way. We may as well be on the moon. I think so. Our approach and things that we feel have been effective or are effective always must have large components of the design where you're working with the people that you're serving or involving or who are closest to the issue and the grassroots, and they have heavy involvement and input and feedback. It's key. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, so I'm going to get in trouble with the producers, but we're going to go for 2 more questions, but we're going to be really quick questions because I'd also like to come back to another delegate, and then we're going to let Jennifer go reluctantly. So please, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny from the U.S., and my question has to do with the systems approach you talked about. As a sociology major, what we talk about often is globalization, and in terms of addressing issues from a systematic approach, it's becoming more and more difficult as the world gets more globalized. So I'm just wondering if you can give us some advice or just your knowledge on how you've navigated your systematic approach in consideration with the world moving at a much faster pace and problems having roots much deeper and varied than many of us experts can sit down and address.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to be sort of brief on these things. These are such great questions that we could speak on all day, so I'm not giving you perfect answers, but I think about this all the time, and one of the guiding principles of NoVo, and just myself and my husband, and I think it's really important that you understand the worldview that you hold and how you're showing up to the world, how you view it. One of the main things or ways that my husband and I agree, and there's evidence, unfortunately, everywhere about this, is that we do live in a world based on, I had said it earlier, domination and exploitation of one another, of people that are weaker. There's a term, manifest destiny, where it's sort of like God's right of kings, if you're more powerful, to be able to take what you want and have dominion over people, over nature. These are ideas that live in the collective unconscious that are, globalization's like, well, we want to go further and further afield for resources and things like that. We will run out of time and resources at some point. We cannot continue to live within that sort of systematic reality. We need to shift our consciousness somehow to be working much more in cooperation and collaboration with nature, with natural systems, with one another, and learn how to partner and to be sort of creatively engaged in getting ourselves out of a lot of the messes we've created. So I think about that a lot, and again, I really feel like if we can be partners, the genders can bring all of their gifts, and so many of the things, we haven't talked about this, but that I feel are so important in women and girls' lives and realities in their empowerment is that bringing sort of the feminine energy and knowing and wisdom to the equation. We all have masculine and feminine inside of us, but the masculine is overvalued and I think has been sort of valued over the more feminine qualities in men and in women and in the planet. And so that's why we're also heavily investing in changing those gender dynamics and going for that parity. Also to build the capacities of human beings. When there are systems that seem too ominous and too big to be able to sort of tackle. I mean, capitalism and globalism and all these things. I think if you can build individual capacities in people to hold on to their compassion, to their empathy, to be able to work creatively and well, and this is what you are all about in terms of building your self-awareness, your skills in leadership, and how to manage relationships, how to work through conflict, how to work through very difficult problems. I think we need that. I think that's an antidote to today's society more than ever. And I think we need to, this is another big area of work that we're doing at the NoVo Foundation, is to think about how we're raising our children. Are we raising our children to be selfish and competitive and, you know, give me the formula so I can go get the job and the money and all this stuff and take over the world? Is that what we're raising in children? Or are we raising children who are holding on to their capacities to be compassionate, empathic, to see how wrong it would be in the example of child marriage to marry a 5-year-old girl that would then be your sort of servant and slave, and you would, you know, derail her life and take away her human rights and her dignity? You know, no. You know what? So I think, again, I think it's important to think about systems, but it's really also important to build human capacities of love, compassion, empathy, understanding, and we'll see what happens in the evolution of the planet if that's enough.
So now we're going to put to test one of our delegates, Maria, who they had communications PR training given by Mikhailov and partners. So we're going to put you to the test. Ask your question very, very specifically. And quickly, please, because we do need to let Jennifer go. And Jennifer, I obviously have marked down, and we've recorded the part where you said you'd be in Australia in person next year. You've given us obviously a lot of reason to do that. Please ask your question.
Okay, I'm Maggie from Argentina. I have a very short question. I think it's more like personal or opinion. Seeing all these great organizations that you are creating that are existing, and I think like most of us, we want to travel also, see the world with our eyes and do something. Like, why it took you to create something new, or to establish your own organization instead of joining one that is already existing?
We actually have joined many that are existing. There's just sort of new collaboratives or new work that we've been a part of to help elevate their work. So I agree with you. Why go start things that are new unless they don't exist, and they need to? But what we've done is looked at the whole, you know, if we wanted to move the issue of girls forward, which we did and we do, would just investing money in existing organizations take us to where we want to go? And the answer was no. We need to work much more creatively in terms of communications, messaging, work with the, you know, sort of halls of power, work systemically, work to do research to find out and call out really what really works for girls, while certainly supporting lots of amazing organizations, existing organizations, because they've been holding the wisdom and that knowledge, and they deserve to be, you know, bolstered and whatnot. We haven't gone and created something new in terms of organizations that already exist.
Jennifer, thank you so very much on behalf of the delegates. They are going to have a very big task ahead of them tomorrow as they look at all the information that they have been able to glean from the speakers. You were absolutely fantastic, your energy and your passion and your very clean office. But listen, thank you so much for joining us. We will come after you for Australia. So thank you.
I can't wait to be there. I've heard such amazing things about you all ladies. I look forward to meeting you around the world soon enough. You're already doing amazing things, and your questions were fantastic, and your desire. And you know, when I was growing up in your age, there wasn't a generation like you. So I look at you and say, you hold the answers. You have everything going for you. Now just support one another and go for it. Thank you so much.
All right. So we are going to hear from our last two guests. And before we get there, I do have some, I like to call it sort of the logistical information. So first of all, I know that each of you received, our delegates received a book by Nala Ayed called 1,000 Farewells. And I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Nala. She is on our advisory board. It's a book that's written by the perspective of one woman journalist who has seen so much and been in so many places. And when I read it, I felt very inspired by her strength and her belief and her understanding of so many different cultures. And that is why we actually thought every year we like to give a book, and this year I thought this was a very a smart book to give, and I hope that you'll all enjoy reading it. And to Nala, in the event that she's tuning in, thank you very much for being so generous by giving us these books. I'd also like to take the opportunity to remind the delegates and our guests that we really want to make sure that, as you heard from Jennifer and Nyaradzayi and Lakshmi and Kakenya, that awareness is the single biggest thing that we can all do together. So I think we do great work in terms of providing platforms. So please do use our hashtag Girls20Summit. We have Google+, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. There's absolutely no reason why you can't share your views. We want to hear them. We want our live audience to also share their views. I think it's really important that if we can cultivate this global conversation, which is what we've tried to do in partnership like people with like Girl Up, that we're not doing it ourselves. We're actually starting to mesh all the information. So now I'm very pleased to introduce and bring to the summit stage our final two guests. We've got Suzanne Petroni and Jeff Edmead. Jeff, please tell me how to say your name. Jeff Edmeadis?
Edmeads. Yeah.
Edmeads. Gosh, I got some of the African names right, and I couldn't get Jeff Edmeads. But Jeff Edmeads and Susan Petroni are with us from the International Center of Research on Women, and they're joining us from Washington. So welcome very much to the fourth Girls 20 Summit. We're all gathered here in Moscow. We've had a full day of talking about the eradication of child marriage, so our delegates are well versed on the statistics, like the 14.2 million. They know about some of the initiatives that are taking place. They've heard from Lakshmi, Kakenya, Nyaradzayi, and now we've just heard from Jennifer Buffett. So you guys are the final act. And really what I thought would be very important is we designed this day so that there would be a real holistic approach to understanding the issue and then being able to leave this issue and understand how these girls can either make a difference in their own communities, and some of our delegates were shocked, and rightly so, that child marriage actually does exist in their country. So what can they do now that they know that it actually exists? And then their mission here is to figure out what are they going to ask the G20 leaders to do. So I thought it was important that we hear from people who have been in the field, who've seen some of the programs, and then hear from you guys. You've done a lot of work, extensive work, research work, and you've seen how that research has played out. So, Suzanne, I'm gonna start with you. I'm gonna just quickly do an introduction of you, and then of Jeff, and then the floor is yours. So, Senior Director of Gender, Population and Development at the International Center for Research on Women. And I'll just stop there and say ICRW has been a partner since the beginning, where you lead the organization's research, advocacy, and programs on sexual and reproductive health and rights, adolescent transitions to adulthood, child marriage, and population dynamics. Jeff, I understand that you are a social demographer at ICRW, so you're going to have to explain that stuff to us and what exactly you do with your day, and that your research primarily focuses on fertility, contraceptive use, and migration. And all of these issues have come up today. So I'll turn it over to you guys. I know that you wanted to take the opportunity and explain what's going on at ICRW with respect to child marriage, and then we're going to go into questions. And just prepare yourselves. These delegates are now well versed on a lot of information, and they've asked some pretty tough questions today. So I don't think they'll hold back, knowing that you're the last two in the final act. So over to you.
Great. Well, pleasure to be with you all today. And I know we're coming to you at the end of a rather long day, and one in which you've been learning a lot about this horrible practice of child marriage. And so what we want to do today is not get into the why child marriage is happening and how it's harmful. You've heard about that already today. You know that there are, as Farah said, the 14+ million girls a year who are forced into child marriage. That's 39,000 a day, or 1 every 3 seconds. And you've probably heard that this comes with a range of outcomes that are really challenging, both to the individuals and to their societies, in terms of the impacts that it has on health and economic development, on gender equality, and on human rights. And so what we want to do is not tell you more about the problem. We want to help you understand that there are solutions. and there are programs that have been proven to work. So hopefully when you go back to your homes, whether you're going back and trying to get your governments to do more on these issues, or maybe creating new programs that can address these issues, whether it's in your own country or through your government's foreign aid and foreign policy, trying to get other countries to eradicate this practice, there are some solutions. So what we'll talk to you about is not only what some of the solutions are, but also how do we meet the needs of already married girls. This is a population that has been taken out of society and out of school and really are among the most vulnerable individuals out there. So I'll talk to you today about how we can help prevent the practice, and then I'm going to turn to Jeff to talk about what works to meet the needs of these already married girls. So let me start on the side of prevention, and what you've probably heard today is that child marriage is caused by a range of different factors depending on the context and the country and the region in which it's taking place. So in some places it can be driven by cultural or religious factors. In other places it's due to assumed roles regarding gender or a lack of options for girls. It's very often driven by economic reasons. So poverty really as a factor driving families to marry girls early. And this is in some cases because a girl is only seen as another mouth to feed. So if the family can give that mouth to someone else to feed, the economic burden on them is lightened. Usually it's driven by a combination of these factors. And so when we think about what works to prevent child marriage, you really need to think about what is driving the practice in a particular community and a context. So that's really the first lesson, is that there is no one-size-fits-all program. And that's disappointing because we always would love to have an easy solution. But that said, there are some common factors that are behind programs that have been proven to work. And ICRW, my organization, a couple of years ago, looked at what some of these factors are. So we did a study of all of the child marriage programs that we could find out there to try to get a sense of what are some of the common driving factors behind it. And we produced this report called Solutions to End Child Marriage. And you can just go on Google and look up Solutions to End Child Marriage, ICRW, and you can download a free copy of this report. But I'm going to touch on some of the top line strategies and lessons that we learned. So first, we learned that there are generally 5 main strategies that programs, whether they're driven by NGOs or governments or other organizations, there are typically 5 programs that they're employing, or types of strategies. And the first one, and really the most prevalent one and the one that we've seen have the greatest impact, is empowering girls themselves, giving them information and skills and support networks to be able to advocate in their own right and on behalf of their peers. And I think you heard from Kakenya and Ntaiya today the power of a girl when she has information and when she is connected and recognizes that there are other options available to her than marriage. She is then able to transform not only her own life, but she's able to go out to her family and her community and really have an impact on many others. So these programs that are empowering girls, they're really trying to give girls the training and the skills. In many cases, it's simply a safe space to be able to join with other girls and network with other girls in their community that enables them to understand themselves better, understand their world, and the options that might be available to them. So what they're trying to do is minimize the isolation in society that girls often feel. And these can be in school or out of school, in the community. Sometimes they're with boys, very often it's just girls alone. So that's the first strategy, recognizing that girls themselves really are the key. When they're empowered, when they have the knowledge and they can change not only their attitudes and behaviors, they're able to transform the way that they're seen by their families and by their societies. and that's tremendous. But we also have to recognize that transforming societies, creating social change, this can't be a burden that girls alone face, because very often they're not the ones who are deciding whether and when and whom to marry. So we also need to work with the parents and the families and the communities, and this is the second strategy that we have seen programs implement and do so successfully. And that is educating and mobilizing parents, families, and community members, enabling them to understand the value of the girl and to be able to change the environment that surrounds the girl. So again, it's recognizing that girls can make change, but only in the context of an environment that's supportive of change. So this second strategy, educating and mobilizing community and family members, is important, and it's probably necessary, but it's only important and necessary in the context of other changes that are happening. It's supportive of other strategies. The third strategy that we have seen programs effectively utilize is focusing on education. And here we're talking not just about access to education, it's also the quality of education and formal schooling in particular. Study after study, year after year, we've seen the importance of formal education as a way of preventing early marriage. We're not exactly sure of the causality, what the exact factor is in regard to formal schooling that enables it to act as a protective factor for girls, but we do know that when girls are in school, there is a strong association with prevention of child marriage. In fact, in some cases, girls who have secondary school education are up to 6 times less likely to be married than those girls who have little or no education. So a really strong connection. And, you know, it could be because when girls are in school, they're seen by society as children, and so they're seen as unmarriageable. It could be because there's something about what girls are learning in school, about their rights, about their options, about the world around them. They could be learning about professions that they could be engaging in other than being married. It could be that they're gaining skills that will help them become employed later on. And so they want to stay in school, and their families see an economic value to them staying in school. And it could be because they're around other girls, and these social networks allow them to gain skills in communicating with others and negotiating with others. And I think with Kakenya's story, you hear the importance of being able to communicate and express your thoughts and negotiate with others. So we need more research in terms of what works and why it works. But again, the causality here, the relationship between education and marriage is really strong. A fourth strategy that we've seen used is using economic incentives or support to families and the girls themselves to stay out of marriage. So again, recognizing that in very many situations, poverty is what's driving early marriage. The girl really not being seen as economically valuable by her family, but rather she's seen as a burden. This is a challenge. So we've seen programs that are providing economic support, and it could be in the form of cash transfers directly to the girl or her family if she stays in school, or if she's not married at a certain age, or it could be in the form of life skills, livelihood skills to give her employability after she gets out of school, and that shows her and her family that she does have economic value. I'll give you just a couple of examples here of programs that have used economic incentives in this way. One is a program called Berhane Huwan in Ethiopia, where the family actually got a goat if the girl stayed in the program and she stayed in school and stayed unmarried through the 2 years of the program. They're now giving chickens because that's more economically sustainable than a goat, but the same idea that the girl herself, by being in this program, is bringing value to the family. Another example is a program in Afghanistan that provides economic opportunities and livelihoods to the girls. The fifth strategy, and the last one that we looked at in our study, is focusing on enhancing the policy and legal environment. So we know, going back almost 100 years, that governments started instituting laws that prohibit early marriage. They set an age of marriage. But we also know that these laws are not always implemented, or if they are, there are exceptions. So, for example, countries may have a law that says the girl can't be married before 18 unless her parents approve. And again, we know that in many of these cases, it's the parents that are actually driving the early marriage. So we need to both work on implementing existing laws on the books and changing, in some cases, the laws and policies, and ideally working at the community level on up to ensure that communities are advocating for these policy changes. Now, when we did this review of programs, we looked at child marriage prevention programs around the world, and we saw that, encouragingly, there are hundreds of programs that are geared to prevent child marriage. Unfortunately, there were only about 24 programs that had solid evaluations that really were able to document measurements of impact. So we were a bit limited in what we could find, and of course, when you look at legal and policy change, we know that it's important, but from a research perspective, it is hard to identify the unique impacts of these policy and legal changes. So that's the one strategy that we found that had the least number of evaluations. We need more research, of course, to show us more about what works and why. 24 is a good start, but again, we need investments in the type of research and evaluations that will enable us to scale up these types of programs. But the bottom line is, we have some pretty good ideas about what works. The most effective programs and interventions are those that work in combination. So ideally, focus on the girl, recognize her empowerment means so much, but also work with the families, work on education, provide economic incentives and opportunities. These are the types of programs, these multi-pronged, multi-sectoral programs that can work. So that's a highlight or a summary of what we found in terms of the solutions and the solutions to prevent child marriage. But what we want to do now is help you understand that there are some 70 million girls out there who are already married before the age of 18, and they are among the most vulnerable and the most isolated because they have been taken out of school and taken out of their community networks and often don't receive services and information. So my colleague Jeff is going to talk to you about one of the programs that he's been working on with ICRW that is trying to help meet the needs of these vulnerable adolescent girls.
That's great.
So over to Jeff.
Jeff, just before you start, I just want to just remind you guys that we have about 20 minutes, and I really would like to give the girls an opportunity to ask questions because you've just really loaded them up with lots of information, and I'd like to make sure that they have a chance to distill it. So I'm going to put the pressure on you a little bit to make sure that the comments are fulsome but brief.
Sure, I think I can manage that. I'll tell you the story of a project I'm working on right now in Ethiopia that I think illustrates a lot of these points very well. So the project works in the Amhara region of Ethiopia, which has one of the highest rates of child marriage in the world. So half of girls are married by the time they're 15, roughly, and almost all of them are married by the time they're 18. It's a very socially conservative place. It's a place where girls really don't have a lot of economic opportunities. It's a poor rural area, so no one has great economic opportunities there. But what we've seen is that in this project is implemented by one of our large NGO partners, Care International. And the idea there is they're working to bring girls together and give them economic empowerment training and training around their health while they're working with their communities. And so what they do is they've organized these girls into groups, small groups of 10 to 20 girls who meet every couple weeks, and they talk about different issues in their lives. They get training on economic empowerment issues, that small things like learning how to save money formally, learning about taking loans, learning basic financial literacy. And then on the other side, there's issues around basic sexual and reproductive health, which it seems like these are simple things, but we're asking, we train certain groups of these girls who go out there and act as peer educators, so they have to go back into their communities and talk about these things with the girls. And the interesting thing is that the social environment that these girls live in is really challenging, but it's not unique to Ethiopia. This is what married girls often have to live with across the world. So if you can imagine the situation of a 13, 14-year-old girl who's been promised in marriage by her family, she may not even know that this has happened, because early marriage before 18 in Ethiopia is illegal, but still happens at a very high rate because the communities value it. They see it as a way of building ties between communities and between different families, and they really do see this as the best thing for their girls. The model that they aspire to in terms of what girls can and should do with their lives is really focused around motherhood, among being a good wife, very, very narrow, if you will, ideas of what women can and should be able to do with their lives. And that's reflected in the sense that this is what parents want for their children. They really do think that it's best for their children, and that's one of the reasons why you see so much of the child marriage. And I think it's important, thinking along those lines, it is important to remember that even though parents are arranging marriages for their children, and these are very much children, it's not because they don't love them. Parents love their children everywhere, and they want the best for them. The issue is when they're going forward and thinking of what is best for them, they're thinking within a very narrow range. They're thinking about them being mothers, them being the husband. They need a husband in order to survive, to have stability, and all these other things that factor into that area. So what you have there is a real issue around how do you change that dynamic a little bit? How do you move things so that girls have more opportunities? And married girls are a particularly vulnerable group, as Suzanne was mentioning, in that usually they go and they live with their husbands. So you move them away from their home, away from their friends. Usually at that point they're also dropping out of school because they're moving. And so they're not in the school system. They're not allowed to leave the home because they're seen as this very vulnerable girl that needs to be protected from the community in general. So they're very, very isolated. The other thing that we've found is that they're not just isolated at that level, but they don't know their husbands. Their husbands aren't their friends. Their husbands are often, in this case, about 8 years older. They have very different interests. And what we found was around a quarter of them never talk to their husbands about what happened in their day. They don't talk about what their feelings and hopes are. They don't talk about how to make decisions about money. So they really are very much alone in their new place where they go to live. So they're a very vulnerable group, and they fall through the cracks of all the government support systems that you can imagine because they're not in school, they're not really using the health system, so they're very isolated. So one of the cool things about this project is that it brings them together, it puts them into groups, it gives them community visibility, so the community knows who they are, because one of the first steps in this engagement was to really go and work very closely with the community, highlight the issue of we're going to be working with these young girls, and we asked the community to nominate married girls to come forward. And again, this is pretty sensitive given that it's illegal for them to actually be married. And we asked them to really play a role in shaping how this project worked out. One of the key things that they did was to pick community members to serve on a sort of a committee. And those committee members received their own curriculum that talked about gender roles and really challenged them in terms of think about yourself, think about where your role is, think of how you contribute towards child marriage. What we've seen there is that once you start to talk to people and you give them the information, child marriage it leads to at least very much of the challenges of early pregnancy, health concerns, all those kind of things. people start to change their minds. They don't want bad things to happen to the girls in their communities or to their daughters or to their sisters. Nobody wants that. They just haven't challenged themselves in that way as yet. What we've seen there is we've seen incredible changes in the girls themselves. They're getting new training, they're out doing really cool things, and real shifts in self-confidence and awareness, and real shifts in some of the mental health measures that we looked at. A feeling of isolation really matters for these girls. I mean, one of the reasons that they love going to school is that that's where their friends are. And when they're not in school, they don't have access to their friends. And because they're not allowed to walk around freely, they can't just go and visit their neighbors without permission. So the mental health piece of this is really quite impressive. And I will say one of the things that is really good about this is we're giving concrete knowledge. So we're seeing really big shifts in use of contraception, big shifts in use of health services like antenatal care and those kind of things. But really, I think one of the more exciting pieces is we're seeing big changes in women's communication with their husbands. So one of the components of it was to give them negotiation skills. So we were giving them negotiation skills about use of health or ability to go work, those kind of things. What we found was that as soon as they had a system for discussing things with their husband and his family, that really helped them, gave them confidence to ask for things like, maybe I could go back to school, or maybe I could set up a little store. And it wasn't necessarily that the husbands were opposed to that, just they'd never talked about it. So we're seeing some really significant shifts at the individual girl and household level. And the other really interesting and fun thing about this project, I think, is that we saw some really distinct changes at the community level. So these community members who we had picked to be on the committees, they had to visit 5 households of participant girls every month and check in on how things were going. And that really highlighted for them the issues of child marriage and how bad it was. And they've become really strong advocates for preventing child marriage, and they've gone in and prevented marriages that were arranged and worked inside the community. So what you have is a very grassroots, organic approach where they're resisting child marriage from within. And what you have there is something that's much more sustainable. If we come in and we say, child marriage is bad, you shouldn't be doing it, it won't work. I mean, that's what we're finding, is that this combination of effects, I think as Suzanne had mentioned, is really where the successful programs are. I think one of the fun things, just to wrap up really quickly, of this project is even though it wasn't supposed to be about preventing child marriage, it's really about trying to help girls get past some of the really bad side effects of child marriage. Even with that, we found that it had a very strong prevention effect as well. So a program can meet both of those goals. And I think one of the things that I really would like to finish with is you can make a huge difference in the lives of girls with a relatively small input. We worked with these girls for just 1 year, and they met twice a month. And the changes were just amazing in the girls themselves. Now we're starting to see some of the actual research evaluation results come out, but the cool thing about this is that it is possible to make a big difference. You know, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by all these numbers, but it is possible to change them. It's possible for individual girls, it's possible within households and communities, and I think it's very much possible at the national level. So don't lose hope. It's tough to deal with a whole day of these statistics and numbers, and this is a very difficult issue. You should be angry about it. It's not something that we should be sitting by and watching happen. And there are real ways to accomplish that change.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think in particular giving us the background research and then showing us an example of how you actually take your research and then ensure that what you learn actually does make an impact. I'm going to go to the delegates for some questions. We only have about 12 to 15 minutes, and I've got about 4 or 5 hands. So again, I'm going to ask, you went through some media training. We're going to put that to use. So delegates, who's got the microphone? All right, whoever's got the microphone, go ahead. Because we're going to try to get to all of you, and the way you do that is to help each other out by making your questions very short.
It'll be short. Hi, I'm Violette and I represent France. I just had a question. Because most of the programs who help early child marriage are usually programs that begin in America or in Europe, but not in the region concerned or in the country concerned, how do you kind of avoid this? And I think Farah talked about this earlier. How do you kind of make sure you avoid this idea of the West helping third world countries, walking in their communities, their village, and being like, oh, what you're doing is wrong, but here's what you should do. And I'm just wondering how you make sure you avoid this kind of culturally related issue.
Are we going to take the questions all at one time, or
No,
do you want us to answer them?
we kind of go one by one. So over to you guys to answer it, because then the pressure's on you to make your answer brief as well.
Okay. You want to start?
Yes, this is a big issue. We shouldn't be shy of what we think of. I mean, we do have ideas of what are universal rights. Most of the countries that we're talking about have signed international agreements saying that early marriage is a violation of rights. So I think we should start by saying we shouldn't be shy of that. But having said that, we'll only accomplish so much if we don't work from within communities. And I think ICRW's approach has always been to work with communities, not against them. And so that means going in, understanding where they're coming from, and working within that framework. And as I said, communities do want the best for the girls in their lives. They don't want bad things to happen to them. And so figuring out messages that work well within that. So keep your girl in school because it protects her, because it gives her skills, it gives her things that can help her later in life. It will help her be a better mother. It will increase her health. Those are the messages that we should be pushing, not something where it's like, all of you are pedophiles, or, you hear this language. It's not helpful in terms of how we work on the ground. So I do think that this is a really important question. I think it's something we all need to keep in mind as we work on it, and to find local partners who are really strong advocates. And they're there. They're just waiting to be found.
Great point.
Jeff said it all. In the interest of allowing you all to ask questions, I'll just leave it there.
Great, thank you. So who has the microphone? Ashani.
Hi, I'm Ashani and I'm from India. Since one of the important points of the summit is also jobs and investment for women, I was thinking when you give these financial trainings to women, how effective is it to actually get them to work first? Because a lot of times, if you look at statistics of different countries, especially in India, there are a lot of anomalies regarding like the data, because there's a lot of rate for literacy, but not actually women working in the workforce. So I would just like to know what are the barriers that are actually there to get women to workforce, and what are the ways to tackle those? Thank you.
Again, a really good question. And, none of these programs that we talked about, none of the strategies in isolation is going to have the impact that we want. Really, we need to work across a range of sectors and issues to ensure gender equality. And only when that happens will we be able to see significant social changes. So allowing women in the workplace and giving them opportunities at an equal level as men is certainly key. That said, starting with some basic, in some of these cases, even basic financial literacy and basic livelihood skills can open up doors to opportunities that didn't previously exist for some of these girls. But clearly we need to work in partnership with the economic sector and employment sectors and make sure that if the girls are trained, there are positions for them to move on to. One other thing, though, that we need to think about is, since we're talking about children, we're talking about girls under the age of 18, we don't necessarily want to create an environment where their economic opportunities outside of school are better than those if they stay in school, right? Because we don't want to encourage child labor. We want to encourage them to stay in school. So we need to balance all of these factors, the human rights base, the education base, the economic and employment base, and make sure that girls are given the information and the education and the skills they need to be able to contribute most powerfully and most efficiently to their economies.
Fantastic points.
I just had one thing with the married girls in particular. They're already out of school mostly. They have children. They're not most likely going back to school. And for them, the financial literacy pieces, the small things make a huge difference. because this allows them to have some money that they control and that they have some say over how it's spent, whether it's on their own health or the health of their children. So their little things can go a long way. I think we need to keep in mind that not all employment is in factories or houses. It can be selling petty trade to support your home.
Okay, who has the mic? Yes, Luca.
Hi, I'm Luca from Germany, and as you said, change is possible, and many of us want to change something. Where would you suggest us to start with that change on the topic when we go home to our communities?
Again, great questions. Wow. So, this depends on where you're coming from and where you feel your value is best placed and where you can add value. In the case of a country like Germany, your foreign aid is already supporting some work to prevent child marriage, and I would encourage you to go to your foreign ministry and encourage them to increase the support that they're giving, both through the foreign policy, working with other governments to raise child marriage as an issue, and the direct foreign assistance that they give. Make sure that they're supporting adolescent girls, whether it's through education or through some of the more direct interventions that we talked about today. They can play an important role on their own through the funding and the programs that they support, and in partnership with other governments. So that would be my suggestion.
I think that's exactly right. But I would also just say, you are a young woman, and you can create networks of young women to support other young women and children. And I think it's not just working at the government level, it's working with your friends and your colleagues and creating social movements for these issues. I think it's a very powerful tool, and I think you're the perfect group to do that with.
Before I go to Carmina and have her ask her question, it's funny, this is actually what a lot of our emphasis has been on, which is create those networks, create those movements. And I'm staring again at Girl Up because they came here to describe how do you actually do this. And I think that your comments are very well placed on this particular group of delegates because when you pass them in the hallways, they're not passive. They're very, as you can see, very active, and their ideas are starting to form in terms of who will be working with whom on what issue. So I think, you do have to have this balance. Carmina.
Hi, I'm Carmina. I'm the delegate for Japan. And my question is to do with the nature of research. So since both of you have basically dedicated your life to this field, you clearly have a personal investment in this issue. But when dealing with research, it's of course when presenting them to people who might not agree or might think differently, it's important to be objective. So I was wondering, how do you balance your heart with the sort of objective view of research?
Here's maybe where you get into social demography and explaining what it is.
Listen, I think the thing with research is that we try to be objective. That's the goal. So we let our findings speak for themselves, but that doesn't mean that we don't care. I mean, I care very, very deeply about these issues, but it's about asking the right questions and doing research in a very solid way that presents evidence that is very hard to refute. So when you come into an argument with someone who disagrees with you, who may be arguing that child marriage is a cultural phenomenon that's been there for a long time, that has no real negative repercussions for anyone, in fact, it may be positive for society, we can point them to some real facts and that you can't really dispute when you get down to it. I mean, it becomes an issue of belief or not belief. But we come armed with research. Research is a weapon for us in this discussion. It's what helps us fight this movement, and we can create our own tools here to really push this issue forward. And I think research is a really, really key piece of this, because people respond to facts, people respond to evidence as they see it, and we can generate that. And I think we know what the situation is out there. When we're not afraid of finding things that don't fit with our worldview. That's what happens when you do research. But we don't think that that's going to happen. We know what we're doing. And the thing is, with the research is really, really an ally. And I think we need to invest much more in it because it's such a powerful tool. People can't argue very easily against it.
And I would just add that the governments around the world, including the local governments in many of the countries that you've heard about today, they want the evidence. They want to know what works. And our organization and others like us are producing that evidence. So I would say there are many more organizations and governments and individuals out there who value the evidence and want to use the evidence to impact policies and programs. So that's what we're here for.
Fantastic. I think we have time for one more question. Does anyone have a question? Yes?
Yeah.
Please.
Hello, my name is Isabella. I'm representing Italy. Mine is more like a practical question. I wanted to know how do you choose the particular site to implement your projects? Is the project tailored on the site? Do you have samples? How does it work?
So again, as Jeff mentioned, we don't come into a community and impose anything. How we choose the sites is very often because the local organizations have expressed an interest in wanting to work on these issues. Frankly, it's also driven by where the donors are funding different programs. And there are certain countries like Ethiopia where the government is open to these programs and where international donors are wanting to invest. Other countries like India, I'll give you one example where the state of Haryana, India, instituted a conditional cash transfer program 18 years ago. When daughters were born, they gave the families of the daughter a small stipend and then said, if by the time this girl turns 18 she's not married, we will give her what's now the equivalent of $250. These girls are now turning 18, and ICRW has the great fortune of having support from the U.S. Agency for International Development to go in and assess the impacts of this program. So we're doing that now, and we'll have results by the end of the year. But in that case, you had a state government that was already committed 18 years ago to this program. You have the U.S. government that wants to know, does this type of intervention have an impact? And you have a research organization that is equipped to go in and do that work. So, it's a combination of factors: the local community, the openness of the government, and the funding.
Well, thank you both very much. We that concludes our session with you, Suzanne and Jeff. You've given them a lot of facts, figures, but not just research, but really a very practical way at looking at what they can do and how they can do it. So thank you very much for joining us from Washington. Very pleased to work with you, and please pass along my regards to Sarah, your fearless leader, who has placed this on the agenda for many years now. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So I think, delegates, after today, it's crystal clear why there's a role for G20 leaders. There's a lot of overlap between the economics and the social and the political and what role they can play. I think there was an interesting reaction when Lakshmi said, in fact, it does exist in more countries than you think, so it may be a little bit closer to home than perhaps when you came in the room today. We had a lot of information on this issue. I think what you will find is when you go back home and you go to all these different websites and you start to Google all the people that spoke to you today, while we were presenting some of the recommendations to the G20 leaders through the Sherpa tomorrow, I think what you've heard from our panelists is that this is a work in progress and that we do have to continue to work on it. So there are different times at different places with different partners, and all that kind of stuff does have to come together. So that really does conclude our discussion on the eradication of child marriage. I'd really just like to wrap up our day by sharing with you and our audience live streaming that between now and this time tomorrow, the delegates will have prepared their communique for presentation to Russia's Sherpa, Kakenya Yudeva, and then they will have begun also to shape their own initiatives that they will put in place when they return home to empower girls and women in their own backyards, or how they will work together. We'll also ensure that they have some fun. I think that's a very important part of the puzzle, and that's going to be facilitated by the ambassador to Russia from Canada, Ambassador John Sloan. And so please know that when you leave this country, We'd like to hear your views on what was fantastic, what you really enjoyed. How can we engage delegates like yourselves more? I would also like to, once again, and I won't list them all, but thank our amazing partners. We have a website. There's a particular place for our partners. That's important. I've said it many, many times. Summits like these do not happen unless we do have the right partners, just not partners, but the right partners. And of course, in particular, we've been here in the home of Google Moscow, taking over their space, running their electricity, eating their food. So thank you very much for hosting us. And the best part is that with anyone who knows Moscow knows that there's terrible traffic. So we've actually been able to walk from our hotel through Red Square and passing the Kremlin every day on our way to the Google office. As a result of the efforts of workbay.net and MacroBlue, I'm really thrilled that this year we have such an incredible site that allows us in such quick time to provide those who are not able to be with us here or join us live stream with the videos from this last 2 days. I have been so impressed by the questions and the panelists that one of the things that I was, and Coralie will laugh when she hears me say this, but I'm like, why can't we put these videos on right away? And this year we have the perfect combination of a partner in workbay.net and MacroBlue. And because of that, I really do want to thank you for allowing us to make sure that these delegates are heard. They've got a lot to say, they say it well, and if we have a platform, then we're going to use it. So thank you very much to workbay.net and MacroBlue. So, I get to stand up here at the podium and my legs hurt because it's been a while. But I couldn't do this without an amazing team. And I really just want to take the opportunity to first thank my board of directors, the advisory group. You can see how engaged they are. We had Elaine yesterday stand up where I am today, really working it. And she brought her expertise and she came all the way here. We have such a phenomenal group of people behind the Girls 20 Summit. And in particular, I want to say to my team, Athena, Coralie, I'm glad you guys are in the room this time. Amy, Leslie, and Isabella, thank you for being here in Russia. I see you running around like crazy. I ask you crazy things. I ask whoever I see first, and you guys all work it and make it look really easy. So I very much appreciate it, and I promise at some point you'll have some sleep. So thank you. A big, big round of applause to my team, please. So that's it. This officially concludes our Girls 20 Summit 2013 live stream portion of our summit. And personally, I'd just like to say thank you very much. We've had a really terrific couple of days. So spasiba and das vidanya.